Shall I? I think what we'll do, if we have to go, we'll just. Councillor Walsh, can you hear us? Councillor Walsh, can you hear us? Yes, we can hear you. A bit quiet. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Can I just check for the public question time speakers? We're just going to get you all in and just change your names. Can I just check, Councillor Farragut, can you hear us? We can't hear you at the moment. So you can hear us. Sorry, everyone, if you just bear with us 1 second, that's to the public question time speakers. We're just trying to sort the sound out on this end. I'm just going to do another sound check to the public question time speakers. Catherine Evans, can you hear me? Can you just confirm? You take yourself off mute. Right, we definitely can't hear. Okay, thank you. We definitely can't hear you at the moment. Just bear with us a bit longer. Apologies, everyone.
Good evening, members. Sorry for the delay. We have a slight problem with our public speakers being able to hear us or us to hear them. The 13 people that are speaking, can I assure you that we're doing our best to solve the issue? But if we cannot, we have got your statements and they will be read so you will not miss out. The only person we don't have a statement from, a written statement from, is Mr. James Hartley Bondi, who is the applicant on the application Land Easter Periwinkle Hall, Links Road, Perry Green, Bradwell. But we have everyone else's statements, which will be read if we cannot solve the issue. I'll now commence the meeting. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies for absence from Councillor Swear, who is being substituted by Councillor Susan Wilson. Councillor Ritchie has sent a message. He is delayed in a traffic jam and will get here as soon as the traffic eases. Other than that, I think everyone else is here. Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda, having regard to the Code of Conduct for members? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Non-pecuniary interest in both items 5A and 5B, as I know many of the speakers in my current role as District Councillor and my former role as a County Councillor, and obviously some of the speakers are also BDC colleagues.
Oh, yes. I will do a joint declaration then on Councillor Tom Walsh, who is speaking. He is a fellow councillor and we all know him. So I think he's the only one. Oh, yes, sorry. I haven't got them on my list. Oh, they're... Sorry, I'm not looking at the second page. Councillor Paul Thorogood is also known to all of us, and Councillor Mrs. Jenny Sandham. So for those three, I'll do a joint declaration that we know them as they are fellow councillors.
Excuse me, could I just say I also know Mr. Foster, sort of.
So you're declaring an NPI?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I think, well, a lot of us know Tom Foster because he was a fellow councillor. So once again, for those of us that did know him, which is probably the majority of us, I would declare an interest on behalf of us all that we all knew, or still know, Tom Foster, who is speaking. Right. Anyone else? No. Item 3, the minutes. I'm deferring the minutes till the next meeting. I go on to item 4, public question time. We do not have any general questions.
Madam Chairman, sorry, could we just go back to the previous one? I just wondered, not wanting to cause any issues, but I just noticed the minutes have gone back a long way now.
They have, yes.
Is there any particular reason for that where we haven't had them?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know if anyone wants to answer. Do you, Alison?
Madam Chairman, apologies that they are very late. It's been an issue of trying to resolve the wording of conditions from previous decisions, but all the outstanding minutes will be published early next week.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alison. That brings us on to item 5, planning applications. We have no applications in Part B this evening. We have 2 applications in Part A. And the first application is application 1700679 out, land north of London Road, Kelvin. This can be found on pages 6 to 105. Now, we do have speakers on this application. Have we managed to contact them?
We've contacted them. I've asked them just to make sure their volumes are turned up, so I'll just try to invite the first speaker to speak.
Well, the first speaker is Mr. Tom Foster.
Mr. Foster, if you can hear us, would you like to unmute and make your statement? Thank you.
No, it's not Mr. Foster.
Mr. Foster, if you can hear us, could you just kindly unmute and just make your statement? Thank you. I'm not getting any response at the moment, Chairman, so I believe we do have the statement.
Yes, we do have the statement.
In writing.
I will ask Alison if she would be kind enough to read the statement, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is the statement of Mr. Tom Foster. When preparing Section 2 of the local plan, there were 2 competing sites in Kelvin to receive substantial housing development, London Road and Monk's Farm. Each had their advocates. The present application was submitted in April 2017 at a time when London Road had temporarily taken the place of Monk's Farm in the draft local plan. However, at the full council meeting held on 5th of June 2017, the London Road site was removed from the draft local plan and replaced with the Monk's Farm site. The developer had applied to build a health centre at the London Road site, and so one must conclude that councillors in voting against the London Road site were not persuaded by the developer's offer of letting a building at a commercial rent to the GP practice. The local plan is now in its final stages. After a long period without a plan, the emerging plan now has considerable force. However, planning officers appear to be so impressed by the provision of a building labelled health centre, even though sited at the village extremity and with no commitment regarding medical staff, that they scorn the long-awaited local plan and recommend approving the application. It is extraordinary that they choose to treat so flippantly the local plan, especially after a period of planning uncertainty, when now at last the council has the means of taking back control. Should this application be approved this evening, residents currently being consulted on the inspector's changes to the local plan will be confused as to the purpose of the local plan. They will feel insulted that the council consults them on a document which is then immediately made obsolete. If this application is granted, it will be an invitation for future speculative applications for development where countryside policies ought to apply. All the developer will need to do to get his way is to offer to build a useful facility. He won't even be sacrificing much in the way of profit, because if the present case is followed, he will look forward to receiving future rents at the commercial rate. I hope that members will vote against this application. If you are in two minds about it, please err on the side of complying with the emerging local plan and vote to refuse. Unlike objectors, the applicant can appeal the decision when there will be a thorough examination by a planning inspector of all the evidence. That's the end of the statement. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much, Alison. Now, the next person wishing to make a statement on this application is Mr. Matt Johnson. Are we making contact with Mr. Johnson?
I'll just try, Chairman, thank you. Mr. Johnson, can you hear us? If you can you kindly unmute and make your statement? Thank you. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're able to hear you, Mr. Johnson. I do apologise. I think we'll have to invite Alison to make the statement as well.
Mr. Johnson's statement, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is the statement of Mr. Johnson. I speak in opposition to this application on behalf of the village of Kelvin, an historic village with roots that go back over 2,000 years. It has always been a village with infrastructure to match. People choose to live here because they wish to live in a village and are willing to accept reduced services in return for easy access to the countryside. The scale and location of this additional proposal for 300 new homes in Kelvin will lead irreversibly to a polluted, deeply unpleasant place to live. People will leave and the community will be lost, for a reason I will now outline. Kelvin has already reached its housing numbers allocation in Braintree District Council's emerging local plan, which is set to be adopted in early 2022, and the Braintree District has a 5.3-year supply of housing in the pipeline. Kelvin and Fearing have already been allocated a disproportionately high level of new housing development in the draft local plan up to 2033. A total of 165 homes are currently being built in Fearing, and a further 835 homes have been earmarked on Crown Estates land at Fearing as part of an area designated for strategic growth in the emerging local plan. In Kelvedon, 237 new homes are currently being built by Carla Homes on the Monk's Farm site off Coggeshall Road, and nearby another 35 homes have outline permission on the Watering Farm site. Heavy traffic and traffic jams through Kelvedon are a daily occurrence at peak times. It can often take 20 minutes or more to get from one end of the high street to the other. The Monk's Farm and the Watering Farm housing developments of 270 new homes off Coggeshall Road will add about 400 extra cars to Kelvedon's roads. Any Colchester, Coggeshall or Tiptree-bound traffic from this new development in London Road will need to pass through the high street, adding to the congestion. This extra traffic will add to air pollution along the high street. Several years ago, I lived on the high street myself, but had to move into the suburbs because my young son was developing breathing difficulties. Many period homes are located right on the road, and a primary school is located near it, with the A12 on the other side. These homes and the school are therefore very vulnerable to additional traffic, noise and pollution levels that this development would increase, not only from the additional 300 homes which are proposed, but also from the additional car journeys caused by relocating the GP surgery and creating a commercial and community hub at the edge of the village. This proposed commercial development would not be proportionate to the services available in Kelvedon and would lead to a significant reliance on car journeys to access these services elsewhere. This proposal, due to its scale and location, would result in an unacceptable urbanisation of South Kelvedon. It fails to appreciate the intrinsic value of the countryside and the function it plays in this location. A year ago, Kelvedon and Fearing had approximately 2,500 households. The two villages are already set to grow by about 1,300 homes by 2033. They don't need any more large-scale housing developments. This proposal for 300 new homes is quite simply not needed. That's the end of the statement. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Alison, for reading Mr Johnson's statement. Next person wishing to make a statement is Mrs Catherine Evans. She's speaking on behalf of Fearing Parish Council. Have we been able to contact
Mrs Evans, can I check if you can hear us? I think you can. We can't hear you, unfortunately, but I think you can hear us. Okay, I think we'll have to invite Alison to read this statement as well.
Alison, I have to ask you to read this statement. This statement's on behalf of Mrs Catherine Evans, and she's speaking on behalf of Fearing Parish Council.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Fearing Parish Council have objected to and continue to object to this development, as this London Road site is outside the Kelvedon village envelope and is not included on the BDC local plan. The two other sites in the Kelvedon inset map, Kelv 335 Monks Farm, 238 dwellings, and Kelv 626 Watering Farm, 35 homes, already have planning permission, with one site being built now. In addition, site Fear 233A in Fearing for 162 homes is building. This site is part of the 1,000 homes Fearing strategic growth location. In its update note of 19th November, BDC maintains that it can demonstrate in excess of a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites, excluding this London Road site. So there is no reason and no need for extra development in the BDC local plan designated key service village Kelvedon with Fearing. The BDC local plan states that Kelvedon and Fearing are two separate villages but functionally act as a whole, with services and facilities in one serving the population of the other. Residents of Fearing use the facilities in Kelvedon, including the Kelvedon and Fearing Health Centre in Kelvedon High Street. A healthcare contribution was agreed for the 238-dwelling Monks Farm site, but no contribution was requested for the Watering Farm 35-home site, nor for the Fearing 160-home site. So why has a new building at the far end of Kelvedon suddenly become necessary? For the future, BDC Policy LPP 22 Strategic Growth Location Land at Fearing includes a provision for NHS facilities. The June 2021 Statements of Common Ground between BDC and the Mid-Essex CCG and between BDC and Crown Estates both agree this NHS provision. So again, there is no need for a new building at the far end of Kelvedon. A health centre at the far end of Kelvedon, replacing the current High Street facility, would not be in a sustainable location for residents of Fearing. The railway station and the boundary between Kelvedon and Fearing are stated as being a 25-minute walk from the site. An elderly or less fit person or families with young children will take longer. Old Fearing, London Road Fearing, etc. are about 2 miles or 3 kilometres, a 40-minute walk from the site for an able-bodied resident capable of walking that distance to a doctor's. More Fearing residents will have to rely on a car, if they have one, adding to the congestion in Kelvedon High Street. Fearing residents who do not drive will be reliant on the 30-minute bus service, which is erratic in timing, 5 to 10 minutes. So tying in with 10-minute GP appointment times will be difficult. In addition, the bus route only connects the main roads, meaning those who live on the outer roads will have even further to walk. There is no pedestrian crossing point on London Road. Dropped curbs and possible pedestrian islands by the site are not an adequate or safe solution to cross what is stated to be a busy road. The Essex Design Guide requires a 2-metre footway for pedestrians on roads with bus routes. Selective widening of the footway on the northern side of London Road does not meet this requirement. Fearing Parish Council strongly urges that planning permission is not granted for this site, which is outside the village envelope and is not in the BDC local plan. Granting permission could set a precedent as regards the application just made for 600 homes on the north side of Kelvin, adjacent to the Monks Farm site. That's the end of the statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you very much for reading that. The next person's statement is from Councillor Mrs. Nikki Joshua, and she is speaking on behalf of Kelvin Parish Council. Can you look?
I will just try to make connection, Chairman. Councillor Mrs. Nikki Joshua, hello. Can you hear us? Can you just confirm? You can hear us, but we can't hear you still. I do apologise. We will have to ask Alison to read your statement as well. We will keep trying to get the sound fixed.
Thank you, Alison.
Thank you.
This statement is from Kelvin Parish Council.
Kelvin Parish Council objects to this development for the following reasons. The emerging local plan, albeit not adopted, does not allocate the site for development. Kelvedon's allocated site on land west of the station has already been granted full approval and work has commenced on site. The proposed recent modifications from the inspectors do not propose this site on London Road or any others to be allocated in the local plan section 2. Furthermore, an additional 35 houses on land opposite at Watering Farm, a speculative development, has also been granted outline permission, although reserve matters approval has yet to be granted. Furthermore, the local plan identifies additional land for senior citizens housing adjacent to St Dominic's, which incorporates a new nursing care home provision as well as supported bungalows, which would also fulfil a part of the housing need for the village. The district also has a 5-year housing supply. Therefore, this development is not required to fulfil any housing needs identified by the plan for the plan period, nor a lack of supply. The planning balance of the officer's report states that they are minded to grant permission due to the provision of a new doctor's surgery which outweighs the negative impact of 300 houses. The requirement for an improved GP service within the villages has everything to do with the lack of GPs, both locally and nationally, and less so to do with the current building. A new building will not bring the required GPs to fulfil the need. This application should not be seen as 300 houses that are required in order to enable the provision of a doctor's surgery that would be an incredibly bitter pill to swallow for the village. Furthermore, its proposed location at the extremities of the village and furthest from Fearing makes it an unsustainable location. The community disagrees strongly with the assumptions made by planning officers and Essex Highways that walking and public transport are viable options and will be used by patients to the surgery. The elderly and those with young families with children in pushchairs and toddlers walking in tow, unable to drive or having waited for a long overdue bus, need to walk to their appointment, will not thank them for the nearly a mile of extra distance from the current surgery to the proposed new one, especially on a dark, wet and windy afternoon, with Tesco delivery HGVs and buses hurtling past them on a narrow footpath along a road that, irrespective of its 30-mile-per-hour limit, is rarely adhered to. If the councillors are minded to grant permission, then greater consideration should be given to the location of the surgery. In particular, earlier master plans cited the surgery closer to the village centre. A solution could be found for the setting of the surgery in relationship to the church farm complex of buildings that reduces the level of damage from moderate to low for the less than substantial harm to a heritage asset, bearing in mind it will be surrounded by an array of 2-storey housing too. In addition, to link the location of the 64-bed care home in close proximity to the surgery provision and therefore necessitating its location away from the setting of Churchill Farm only benefits those 64 elderly residents and not the wider community, of whom many are indeed elderly but are located close to the centre of the Kelvedon village. Kelvedon Parish Council cannot support a proposal that doubles the number of houses in the village beyond what is required and moves a key provider of infrastructure away from the majority of its patients, resulting in an unsustainable travel and additional misery. That's the end of the statement. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much, Alison. The next statement is from Councillor Paul Thorogood. He is the BDC Ward Councillor and the Essex County Council Divisional Chair. Councillor. having made contact.
Councillor Farragut, can we just try your connection, please, and see if we can hear you? Could I just ask you just try one more time for me? No, we're unable to hear you. I do apologise.
Alison, do you have the copy with the red on?
Yes, but I don't have it in red, I'm afraid.
Oh. I'm sorry, I'm just querying this because Councillor Thorogood has written at the top of his, the words in red are for information only and won't be read out, which gives Alison a bit of a problem.
Madam Chairman, I think I can see the parts that he refers to in red, so I'll miss those parts out.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. This is the statement of Councillor Thorogood. Normally, the offer of a brand new purpose-built health centre would be a big plus for a new development, but the negotiations surrounding this health centre have been shrouded in secrecy from the start, and there has been no public consultation. Building 300 unneeded houses and moving an already well-located health centre to a peripheral location outside the walking distance of most of Kelvin and Fearing makes no sense to villagers. The shortcomings of the existing health centre are due to staffing issues rather than the adequacy of the building, issues that are unlikely to be resolved just by constructing a new health centre. Without wishing to state the obvious, people who visit GP surgeries tend to feel unwell, and a higher than average proportion are elderly and or have mobility issues. Whereas many elderly disabled people can walk or use their wheelchairs to get to the current GP surgery, that will not be the case with this proposed new health centre. Patients with cars will drive, and those without a car will be forced to rely on lifts, the half-hourly bus service, or walk to get to the appointments. Many elderly residents currently living in Thorne Road and Glebe Road, for example, are within a 5-minute walk of the current health centre. The proposed new health centre location is 1 mile away or 24 minutes walk for an average 80-year-old. Fearing residents face a 4-mile round trip. By moving the health centre to the extreme edge of Kelvedon, near the A12, developers and planners would be creating a problem that currently does not exist. If need be, the health centre could be refurbished on its existing site to meet current standards, or alternative locations could be explored, such as the Crown Estates land at Fearing, where 1,000 new homes are already in the local plan. Boots, the only chemist in Kelvedon and Fearing, is currently located centrally in the High Street. As part of the proposed new retail plans of this London Road site, it is likely a new pharmacy would open next to the new health centre. Would Boots relocate, or would they keep a presence on Kelvedon High Street? If they relocate and the current branch closes, prescriptions would have to be picked up from this new peripheral location, causing yet more hardship. A number of constituents have written to me voicing their concerns. One, a pensioner in her late 80s, wrote, "My immediate concern is the talk of the doctor's surgery being moved to London Road. It is madness to even think of moving a health centre there. Practically everyone visiting would need access to a vehicle of some sort, whether car or bus. Can you imagine trying to book an appointment with the bus timetable in one hand? The increase in traffic would be enormous. Regarding the surgery, as it is at the moment, I find it hard to understand, given the growing population in Kelvedon and Fearing, how it is that there is only one doctor on duty most days. There were 3 before the growth in development, so it does seem strange. Until very recently, there used to be 2 GP surgeries in Kelvedon, and then they merged, and now there is only one. A new health centre building does not guarantee there will be more GPs. Members, if you are minded to grant permission because of the new health centre, despite the reasons, which is the ones that are given in red, which will not read, can you please ask planning officers to reconsider moving the proposed health centre to the eastern side of the proposed site so that it is closer for villagers to walk to? County Highways has suggested many improvements need to be made to London Road and the High Street to make it safer and a more enjoyable experience for pedestrians, and include dropped curbs, non-slip paving at new traffic islands, and raised curbs and bus shelters at bus stops. In my view, 2 new pedestrian crossings would also be needed, one in London Road and another in the High Street, and I would like your support to push these through the local highways panel if you grant permission for this scheme. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's the end of the statement.
Thank you very much indeed for reading that, Alison. Thank you. And the next person who has made a statement is Councillor Mrs. Jenny Sandham. She is the BDC ward member for the area. Can we
Thank you,
contact
Chairman.
Mrs. Sandham?
I will just try to make contact with Councillor Mrs. Sandham. Councillor Mrs. Sandham, can you hear us? You can hear us, but we definitely can't hear you at the moment. Okay. All right, thank you for confirming.
Are you all right to read another statement, Alison?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the statement of Councillor Mrs. Sandham. There is a huge level of concern amongst residents about this application. Kelvin and Fearing are historic rural villages which have already been allocated very high numbers of additional housing in the emerging local plan, over 300 in Kelvin and 1,000 in Fearing, which will mean it doubles in size. One of the main justifications in the planning report for recommending approval of these additional unallocated 300 homes, despite BDC now having a 5-year housing supply, is the inclusion of a new doctor's surgery which would replace the current surgery which is in the centre of Kelvedon. However, there are serious concerns amongst residents about this proposal to move the location of their doctor's surgery to the very far end of Kelvedon, much further away from the majority of residents and at the furthest possible location away from Fearing residents. Information has not been shared about whether other more central village locations have been properly considered for a new doctor's surgery, which would not involve building an additional 300 unallocated houses. It is therefore not clear why, for example, a location on the Crown Estates land, which is more central to both villages and where 1,000 houses have already been allocated, has not been looked at in more depth as a viable and preferable alternative. Since the original plans were submitted in 2017, the proposed location of the new doctor's surgery has actually been moved even further away from the village centre in these revised plans, to the very furthest edge of the proposed new settlement, which would make it significantly more difficult for existing village residents to reach on foot. There has unfortunately been a lack of consultation about this change and a great deal of confusion, certainly for residents and parish and district councillors, but also, as of yesterday, an email from the NHS showed they also think that the replacement doctor's surgery would be located at the near edge of the development, as it was in the original plans. Their email about this has been forwarded separately to members, as has an email from Place Services confirming that they have also not been involved in this harmful change to the doctor's surgery location, and that moving it is not based on the heritage concerns of this development. Place Services' response was as follows, quote, "To my knowledge, the Historic Environment team at Place Services have not been involved in discussions regarding the site layout or position of the health centre. I do not believe we have been in any meeting with the applicant or the local authority regarding the site in at least for the last few years. In a general sense, yes, I do agree that a sensitively designed and appropriately massed health centre could have no more impact on the setting of the listed buildings than residential units. However, I would heavily caveat this, as it has been identified that the proposed development, in principle and irrespective of detail, will result in harm to the setting of the identified heritage assets which cannot be removed or mitigated." End quotes. There are other areas as well where a lack of consideration has been given to detrimental impacts on existing village residents in the development of this application. It is a real shame, for example, that the buffer between existing houses along London Road and the proposed new houses has been removed in these revised proposals, which would mean current residents would be much more overlooked, especially because the land proposed for new houses slopes upwards away from their back gardens. Also, there is no mention in the report of the impact of the extra traffic which this development would involve, due not just to the additional houses, but also due to so many more residents having to drive instead of walk to the doctors and potentially the pharmacy. On the many older listed buildings throughout Kelvedon and Fearing, many are set on the pavement along the high street, with no front gardens or even verges to protect them. These older listed buildings are particularly vulnerable to extra traffic levels because the houses don't have foundations. They are built onto the earth, so the vibrations caused by even more traffic could be serious and very detrimental. Thank you for listening, and I hope that these serious concerns about the lack of public engagement and detrimental impacts of this application and relocation of the doctor's surgery in this way on local residents will be taken into account by members when determining the application before you. That's the end of the statement.
Thank you very much, Alison. The next statement is from Mr. Michael Smith. He's the agent from JCN Design and Planning. Can we make contact with Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Smith, can I check if you can hear us, and can you just confirm, just verbally respond, please? Thank you. Okay, so you can hear us, but we're not able to hear you at the moment.
Right,
Okay,
I'll have
thank
to
you.
ask Alison if she'll read this. This is a statement by Mr. Michael Smith, the agent.
Thank you, Chairman. On behalf of the applicant, thank you for the opportunity to address the committee this evening. This application is a result of many years of discussions with our delivery partners, statutory consultees, Kelvin and Fearing's parish councils, the county council, and of course the officers at the district council. We are excited to have reached the stage where the application can be presented to you with the case officer's recommendation for approval. The application seeks outline planning permission with all matters reserved and is the first step to the creation of a well-designed and high-quality scheme in the form of a community-led mixed-use development. A set of parameter plans and a design code are proposed to be approved at this stage to set the terms for the submission of the reserved matters, which will start with the detailed scheme for a new healthcare centre to serve Kelvin, Fearing, Rivenel and the surrounding area. Dr. Gill from the Kelvin and Fearing Health Centre will speak next to explain the problems presented by their existing building and how important it is to expand the range of services that his team can provide and to secure healthcare provision in the village for the long term. The healthcare centre is one part of the community hub that is proposed, and the application also seeks approval for an early years and childcare centre, picking up the existing shortfall in childcare places for Kelvin and Fearing, as well as meeting the projected demand from the new homes on the site and those that are currently being built elsewhere in the village. It will be delivered and operated by Brimpton House Nursery, who already have premises on the High Street, and 4 other nurseries in the area, all of which are rated as outstanding. A care home is also proposed, more than doubling the number of beds that are currently available and helping to fill the gap caused by the fact that only a quarter of the current demand for care home provision in Kelvin, Fearing and Rivenel is currently being met. In addition, a small-scale retail area will be created to serve the scheme, ensuring that the existing life and vitality of the High Street is preserved. Up to 300 new homes will support the creation of the new community facilities, with 40% designated as affordable housing. Details will follow at the reserve matter stage, and at this point we expect that most of the scheme will comprise family homes, although there will be smaller properties too. These will help to meet 2 important areas of demand from the existing community, providing the chance for first-time buyers to get on the housing ladder and allowing older people to downsize into accommodation that better suits their needs, allowing both groups to stay in the village and helping to maintain a mixed and vibrant community. The site will be enclosed by parkland, protecting the setting of the village when viewed from the west, addressing the potential visual impact of the built development and creating appropriate relationships with the listed buildings, railway line and frontage to London Road. The belt of landscaping will include a circular walking route, allotments and play areas, and will be laid out with a variety of formal and informal characters. In addition, the design code secures the delivery of tree-lined streets in compliance with the latest guidance from central government and including a palette of trees as part of the creation of areas with different characters across the site. In short, the application for outline planning permission proposes a new neighbourhood that integrates with the village, delivering an aspirational, beautiful place where today's residents benefit from the delivery of much-needed community facilities and tomorrow's families can thrive happily and safely. As such, I trust that you will concur with the case officer's recommendation and resolve to approve the application. The end of the statement.
Thank you very much, Alison. And the final statement on this application is from Dr. Victor Gill. Can we make contact?
Hello, Dr. Victor Gill, can you just confirm whether you can hear us, please? Thank you. No, we're not able to hear you. I do apologise, everyone, for the continued issue we're having tonight.
Thank you very much. I will ask Alison to read the statement from the doctor. Thank you.
Madam Chairman. My name is Dr. Victor Gill, one of the GP partners at Kelvin and Fearing Health Centre, alongside Dr. Pinto, who could not be here tonight. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to the committee about the new medical centre, which will be situated on the land to the north of London Road, Kelvin. We currently serve a patient population of around 7,600 who do not only reside in Kelvin and Fearing, but we also have registered patients who live in locations around the surrounding area, including Rivenall, Witham, Malden, Cockashaw, Messing, Tiptree, Markstay and Copford. With the housing schemes currently approved in Kelvin and Fearing, we expect that we will need to accommodate at least another 1,700 additional patients in the near future. We are currently struggling to provide adequate primary care services in our existing facilities. Our building, which is an old school, is simply not fit for purpose. It is too small and has a poor layout of rooms, is in a poor state of repair, and access is difficult for patients with mobility issues. Externally, off-street parking provision is inadequate and often causes congestion on the high street when patients wait for a parking space to become available. At present, we are simply unable to function efficiently and meet the growing demand for services for our patients. Our clinical team consists of 2 GPs, 2 nurse practitioners, 2 practice nurses and 2 healthcare assistants. These are a very important part of our team as they carry out blood tests, check blood pressure, urine analysis, pre-diabetic checks, routine health checks, ear examinations for wax, wounds and leg dressings, ECGs, anticoagulation clinic and immunisations, flu, pneumonia, thank you, shingles and COVID. We also host outside services, include a weekly community antenatal service. Our administration and reception team of 20 full-time and part-time staff would benefit in every respect from a new place of work. We are also currently looking at temporary clinical accommodation to meet our needs until a new building is ready for occupation. A new building will help us recruit additional staff, offer additional services such as minor surgery, plus additional community services we will be reviewing. It will provide sufficient parking for both staff and patients and be able to accommodate population growth in the future. It is important to recognise that the new facility will secure the provision of healthcare services in Kelvin and Fearing and the surrounding areas for the short, medium and long term. We already find it extremely challenging to operate within our current building, and without these new facilities, we will simply not be able to cover the growing demand for services that will be required. The importance of high-quality healthcare has always been highlighted by the ongoing pandemic, and the new building will allow us to better serve the community, will make us a more attractive option when recruiting the best staff, and provide Kelvin, Fearing and the surrounding area with a wider range of medical services. I cannot emphasise enough how important it is for the whole of Kelvin, Fearing and the surrounding area to have a new healthcare facility to serve our patients. We thank the officers for their support and I ask that you approve this application so we can operate from a new modern building that the community can be proud of. That's the end of the statement. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much, Alison, and that brings us to the end of statements on this application. So we will now go to the planning presentation, which is going to be made by Matthew. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to apologise to the speakers, but we have heard your statements, and although some of them exceeded the 3 minutes, because someone else was reading them, I did let them run on a bit. So now go to Matthew. Good evening, Matthew, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. So the application before you this evening is an outline planning permission with all matters reserved for a mixed-use neighbourhood development comprising up to 300 dwellings, health centre, local retail area, care home, early years and childcare facility, open space, landscape buffers, and supporting infrastructure that includes sustainable drainage and to access from London Road. Hopefully, before I start, hopefully members will have received the comments received by Right Honourable Priti Patel in the lead up for the meeting today. Hopefully members will also receive the Parish Council, Kelvin Parish Council's response and the update letter that was circulated. Okay. So 2 plans. The first plan is the one on the left, which is the location plan, which shows the exact red line of the site. and the plan on the right is a plan that I've sort of quite crudely drawn a red line around to give you an idea of where the site is in relation to the remainder of the village of Kelvin. And also there's other sites that I've got been granted plan permission which aren't shown, such as the Carla Homes development up here. Okay, so just in terms of then some of the context of the site. So again, I've drawn a red line around the site. So you've got the A12 to the south, the railway line to the north, and then you've got the two listed buildings here and the church. I'll come on to those later in the presentation. The flood zone, the settlement boundary, you can hopefully just make out that black line as it exists in the adopted local plan. And then the yellow is the conservation area boundary. Okay, so I wanted to just show you this plan. This is the first iteration of a layout that officers received on the application. This was when it was for up to 250 dwellings with the associated community uses. As you can see, that the uses were split up at this time. The development is pushed much closer to the edges of the listed buildings. It also initially included an employment facility at this side. This was strongly championed by the applicants, but officers requested that the employment be removed from the proposal in favour of securing 50 additional dwelling units, so a total of up to 300. This is because officers consider that 50 additional units would provide a greater overall benefit than the employment use. I've obviously covered this in the committee report, but the long and short of it is that we don't really have any need for any more employment land, so that's why the houses would be a bigger benefit, primarily. Okay, so moving on. So since that initial site plan, the site has been subject to extensive negotiations to provide a set of parameter plans and a design code. So the parameter plans secure spatial fixes, and the design code seeks to secure how the development will come forward in the public realm with a number of key criteria and strategies. I just want to reassure you that the presentation doesn't cover the whole document, but just picks up on a few key areas. The first of which is the first two parameter plans, which is the land use parameter plan and the green spaces parameter plan. So, unlike the initial layout back in 2017, these parameter plans now actually seek a buffer from Churchill Farm, which is this listed building over here with a group of 4 listed buildings. So that buffer is about 52 metres total from where the edge of the residential would be at the shortest point, and then similarly for Crabs Farm, which is the other listed building over here, there's a smaller buffer, but that overall distance over third-party land would still be over 100 metres, shortest distance. So you'll see the sort of hatched area at the top of the site. That's land that has been safeguarded, if you will, for a noise buffer from the railway zone, which we are envisaging will be in the form of a bund. So that will protect the future occupiers of, in terms of noise impact from the railway, and also in terms of outward looking from the railway as well. The community hub, as you can see, is on the western aspect of the development in purple. I'll come on to its justification of its location a bit later. In terms of the residential, as you can see, that is separated down to a few different parcels, but it does actually respond to some of the site constraints on the site, including a hedge and ditch which runs down here at the top, so that's enabled that to be retained. As I say, it does provide a spatial fix, so this is the very maximum extent of what the residential would be. That includes, drives and everything like that. So the edge of the houses won't necessarily be right up on this boundary. Okay, and I think on the green spaces plan, that again just fixes the areas of green space, as I've said, similar to the land use plan, but it just gives you a flavour of where perhaps some of the dry basin suds features would be, some of the play areas, etc. And then changing to the other two parameter plans, so density and storey heights. Yeah, these plans, I guess, are linked in so far as that a higher density would normally denote the possibility of a higher number of stories to achieve the higher density. But I think it's the plans themselves ensure that we don't get inappropriate development on the edge of the site, up to 3-storey, where 3-storey really is not really characteristic of Kelvin, but there is. This plan does allow for some potential and key corners on the avenue, but that's the only place. If it's appropriate, obviously that would be something to consider at reserve matter stage, but certainly there will be a predominant 2-storey development here, and obviously a mixture of density, which, as we'll come on to, does help secure a difference in character and street hierarchy. Okay, so I wanted to include this document or this plan for members' information. It's something that's submitted by the applicant. I think obviously our members can make their own minds up about the location of the site, but the plan basically shows what is within a walkable distance in terms of the existing services in the village. So, for example, number 1 is the library, 2 is the hotel, and the railway station is number 20 up here. So you can see the difference in the sort of distances, for an average person walking. I think in terms of the community hub location, obviously this has been quite extensively covered in the committee report, albeit I appreciate has been raised numerous times at public question time. I think it is important to note that the health centre does have a larger catchment than just Kelvin and Fearing, as alluded to, by the GP. So, of course, I think I'll come back to in question time if members have questions about the original proposal and why it's been moved, further into the report. Then obviously I'm happy to answer questions then, but I think I'll leave it there for the time being. Okay, so this is just to set out the spatial hierarchy of roads that we're looking to secure. So the fixed one is the spine road, and the rest of it is kind of indicative. So firstly, an extract from the design code on the community hub. So it has its own section, which I've taken it from. It's an indicative plan because it's outlined of all matters reserved, but it has been specifically designed to adhere to the requirements of each use, specifically the health centre, the retail, the care home and the early years. So this, as it's shown there, the scheme could be delivered in theory at reserve matter stage. I have included some text on the bottom right, not to read out, but just as a reference to show that there is code that underpins this as well, and I will show you an example at the end of the parameter plan and design codes part of the presentation. And you can see the rhythmic avenue of trees as well, which is something that officers really wanted to secure here to give that sort of distinct character. So I've included a copy of a draft floor plan of the new health centre, which is currently being agreed with the applicant, the CCG, and the GPs at the practice. So the plans aren't for approval because of the outline nature of the application, but they are a product of negotiations between the applicant, the CCG and the GP practice, and are likely to represent close to the finished product if and would come forward through reserved matters if planning permission is granted for the outline. I'm told the building will also be BREEAM excellent. So, as members will be aware, the need for a new health centre in Kelvin is covered extensively in the committee report, and therefore I don't think it's appropriate to go into the detailed justification in the presentation. But I would like to remind members of some key points to think about. The CCG, the Clinical Commissioning Group, support the provision of a new health centre and have an approved and outlined business case for it to be delivered on this site. Funding for the health centre has been agreed, and the district valuer has agreed a rental value as well. A full business case to progress the proposal further cannot proceed until planning permission has been secured for the outline. Therefore, it's kind of in limbo at the moment. It can't really proceed any further. I understand that the leases have nearly expired on the existing 2 health centre buildings in the village. They are, as has been alluded to, unable to accommodate the growth from this development, and even one Brimton house is subject to a planning application to change to residential by the building owner. The CCG considered that this option is really the only one that would be deliverable and cost effective in current circumstances in terms of a new health centre. Other options have been considered, such as trying to renegotiate leases and find other sites, but as I said, have been, generally speaking, discounted by the CCG. It is important to note that the new health centre isn't being gifted by the developer, but the developer will make the land available for it. So obviously there is an inherent benefit of that, because there's no other land that's been put forward, or certainly that's got the CCG involved to, that support a new health centre on that location. And I think it's important to note as well that the health centre would be delivered quickly, because no residential dwellings could be occupied until the health centre is delivered. The Kelvin Parish Council raised concerns about the actual delivery of the health centre, but what they're saying is true. We can't force the GPs and the CCG to open the new centre, but it'd be the same with any development. Officers wouldn't be reporting the application to committee with the inclusion of the health centre as a significant benefit to members, unless we were satisfied as much as possible at this stage that the health centre will be delivered. So just to confirm that officers are satisfied, as we can be, with the proposals, because they are so sufficiently advanced that the new health centre would be delivered. And in a recent meeting with the CCG and a recent email to one of the ward members, it confirms that the new health centre is the only current option for improving health service in the village, as I've said. In any case, should the health centre not be delivered, no residential occupations will be able to take place, so there's obviously inherent incentive to build the health centre. And then this is just a first floor plan, as I said, indicative before. Okay, jumping back into the design code, and so I've extracted multiple pages of the design code for your ease, just to show you some of the different character areas. This is the central avenue, the spine road, if you will, which is fixed. So you've got large trees and rhythmic planting going down the avenue in a tree-lined street, with minimum distances as secured through the section drawings. The trees themselves will be in the highway verge, so will be managed by Essex Highways. The connecting streets, so this is type A, so this is the similar in design to the spine road, but there's a key difference in that the trees are smaller and they're slightly more spaced out, not quite as rhythmic, with a couple lost for a visitor space here and there. So that would, as a starting point, help to delineate the character, but also, as we've looked at the parameter plans, the density would be lower in this section, but also the code would bring about differences in materials and things like that. So what the code is trying to do is create a different character while still delivering tree line streets. And I think it is worth noting as well that all streets on this development have been designed to 20 miles per hour speed limits, which is what will be put forward, I understand. This is the secondary connecting street, so it's completely different to what's been gone before. So this is a shared surface road. The trees are in management company land, so they'll be managed by a management company, so they can be retained. And yeah, they're less sort of rhythmic, they're more infrequent, more organic, and again, that's to help provide a difference in character, and the code will secure that. And again, you've got the section down the bottom which kind of would secure minimum distances. Come on. Okay, so the final element is the green lanes and private drives. You can see that it's slightly different again. Because of the location of the open space, officers are satisfied that it wouldn't need to provide trees on both sides. Actually, you get a cluster of trees on the open spaces. So that's that kind of the section drawing that's shown there. And I did say I would show an example criteria, although perhaps it's not quite as visible as I was hoped. But it's things like scale, block layout, land use and typologies, building edge and setbacks, building heights, materials, appearance. These are all things that are being secured, boundary treatments, and obviously it gives detail and criteria to each one. So the code is setting out what the reserve matters would look like effectively and being very prescriptive in that sense. There's a couple of other elements. I won't touch on them in any great detail, but the code does have some principles surrounding the noise bund, as we've discussed. Given some section drawings here, as you can see, trying to make sure that key design principles are followed. When the reserve matters comes in, and that's what the code's trying to do there. You've got some building typologies, materials, and it does actually specify which materials in which areas later on in the code. You've got things about wildflower meadows, ecology, SUDS features, and also about tenure blind design of houses. And I think it is worth noting to members that the affordable housing mix has actually been agreed up front with the housing officer and the applicant in the Section 106, despite the outline nature of the application. So that is something that officers would say is an additional benefit, because often you wouldn't have that on an outline application. So that would obviously force whoever comes forward for reserve matters to build the affordable housing in accordance with what we've agreed and what we asked for. Okay, so moving away from the design code and parameter plans then, just picking up on some other key issues in the report. This is, on the top left is an existing tree plan, and what I've done is I've taken some photos and sort of labelled roughly where I've taken the photos from on the tree plan, and obviously the arrows point in the direction. And give you a flavour of the hedgerows that are there at the moment. So hedge-free is labelled as A on the plan. As members of the motion in the report, this hedge is required to be removed to facilitate the community hub and the spine road. H4 or hedge 4, is labelled as B. This is most likely to be retained in accordance with the parameter plans for approval, as I've shown you earlier. H1 or hedge 1 is the hedge labelled as C, which is on the site frontage. To facilitate access to the site, approximately 16 metres would need to be removed of the hedge. As access is a reserved matter, we're unable to conclusively say how much of the hedge would need to go at this stage. I think one of the things is worth noting and worth highlighting is that the hedges to be removed have been assessed as having a good prospect of being translocated within the development, and it's something that the developer has agreed to. So essentially, if there is any hedge loss, well, obviously there is, but any of those hedges that are healthy, there will be an option to try and translocate them into the development itself. So even though they will be lost where they are currently, in some capacity, obviously the development wouldn't remove more of the hedge on the front than it needs to get the access. But in terms of translocating those hedges, parts of the hedges that do move, that's obviously important and something that's been agreed to, and that could also be strengthened with new planting and species as well to ensure that the hedgerow is healthy. And as I said, the prospect of this is written into landscape conditions, which, having had a discussion with the landscape officer, they're happy that it puts appropriate safeguards in place to secure that as far as possible. And then this is the same plan again, but just showing the other hedge, H2, which is on the easternmost axis, where that will go if that is to be delivered. And again, it's similar in terms of 16 metres to be removed for the access. But again, because it's we don't know at this stage, obviously we don't know exactly how much would be removed. But again, the whole point about the translocation is still relevant. I've included this plan about the protective view in the neighbourhood plan. It's one thing that, one of the main conflicts with the neighbourhood plan in terms of, the development would directly impact on this view. So the image at the top is the view as it is shown in the neighbourhood plan, and the image at the bottom is taken using standard methodology by the council's independent landscape consultant. So I think obviously I'll let members make their own mind up, but officers consider that the top photo is zoomed in, and that's certainly been the case of what the landscape consultant found. And actually the view from the A12 slip road across the site looking towards the spy, you can't really see it, only potentially in fleeting views. So yes, obviously we have to acknowledge that the development would result in a loss of or directly impact this view, but I think the overall impact is more limited than I think the neighbourhood plan would have you believe with the with that image. But obviously, as I say, I'll let members make their own minds up on that. Listed buildings. So one of the sort of main harms of this development is the impact on listed buildings. So again, I put sort of the numbers represented to the pictures on the plan to show kind of roughly where I took the picture from and the impacted heritage asset. So Churchill Farm is up here, as you can see from this photo. Views towards the church and the old vicarage are here, as you can see from B. And C is the view towards Crabs Farm, which is over here. I think it's important to note that the site would affect 8 listed buildings. In the update report, there is a typo. It does actually say 7 affected listed buildings, but this should be 8. And just to confirm, that's 4 less than substantial harm at the middle of the scale, which is the 4 buildings at Churchill Farm, and then 4 less than substantial at the lower end of the scale, which is the church, the vicarage, and the old vicarage. That was the old vicarage, Crabs Farm. And I think, as you hopefully will have seen, the update report clarifies the harm to the old vicarage, which was provided after the committee report was published. As evidence from my photo below in September, this photo here, the old vicarage cannot be seen due to the vegetation, but additional photos were sent in by the occupants to suggest that in winter months there is a degree of visibility through the vegetation. But I think this, as I say, this harm has been qualified by the historic buildings consultant as less than substantial at the lower end, so like the very, very low harm. But overall, the cumulative heritage harm is considered to be significant. In terms of the other photos, some sort of notable points. So the first photo on the left is taken from Crabs Lane, looking over the railway bridge, looking down the site, so sort of over here. This is a photo looking at the properties on London Road from the sort of westernmost part of the site, and this photo is from the site looking down to the backs of those properties that are on London Road, and then a photo just looking out over the railway line with a train going past, just to see the difference in levels and such like. Okay, so the piece and I'm nearly finished. So I think just to sort of qualify the harms, so we're outside settlement limits and it's conflict with the adopted development plan and the emerging Section 2 plan. Harm to 8 listed buildings, as I've said. Direct impact on the protected view, as I've hopefully shown you, it's of limited value. Limited character and landscape impact, as set out in the report. There would be some hedge loss, but options to translocate within the site, and obviously there would be significant new tree planting for the tree-lined streets. The noise impact from the railway and the A12 on future residents, albeit this can be managed. The loss of a mineral safeguarding area, which obviously covers a broader area, albeit again this is limited for reasons set on the report, because the site's proximity to residential development as existing, and obviously you have the increased vehicle movements as well. Benefits, so up to 300 new dwellings, 180 market and 120 affordable. Obviously these are maximum figures, it might be slightly less than that. Depends on the reserve matter stage. Economic benefits during construction. Delivery of a new health centre supported by the NHS, CCG and the doctor's surgery or the GPs. A new care home, new areas and childcare facility. A small retail element, not to compete with existing shops in Kelvin. Open space, play space and allotments on site. Infrastructure improvements that are set out in the report, but for example widening footpaths, crossing points. The site is an accessible location for public transport options, so hopefully reduce the reliance on the private car overall. And the design codes and parameter plans will enable a development to come forward in a more exemplar way and secures tree-lined streets, on both sides for the majority of it, which officers, consider is in line with the NPPF and that paragraph 131. So, taking into account all the harms, weighing them against the benefits in the context of national and local policy, officers have concluded that although finely balanced, the benefits of the proposal, particularly when factoring the health centre, outweigh the adverse impacts, including the conflict with development plan, including the neighbourhood plan. So, officers' recommendation to this evening, members, is that the application is approved, subject to securing the Section 106 agreement, which is very nearly complete. I think there's just a few loose ends being tied up. The heads of term on page 85 of the committee report, minus the skylight provision, as I've set out in my update letter, securing an appropriate assessment from Natural England, the additional network rail informative, as set out in the update letter, and also changes to condition 16, 31 and new condition 39, again set out in the update report. I think that is the end of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you very much indeed. Members, before I open it up to members, can I just ask Councillor Ritchie? Councillor Ritchie, as you were delayed, I did declare a joint declaration on behalf of us all regarding the 3 district councillors that made a speech, and that many of us knew Tom Foster. Do you have any additional declarations to make?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and apologies for my tardiness this evening. The traffic was awful leaving London. There is just one minor non-pecuniary interest, and that is a speaker for item 5B is known to me, Tom Speakman. Other than that, nothing else to declare, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And members, did you all receive the planning update we received today on this application? Right, thank you. I'll now open it to Councillor Abbott. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Braintree District Council and this committee have met the requirements of the government, which is a very challenging requirement to have a 5-year housing land supply, and our new local plan is at an advanced stage. We've granted consent for thousands of houses, some on controversial sites, to meet this high requirement. Kelvin and Fearing, which officers say for planning purposes is considered together as a village, is already set to take, with this application, if we granted it tonight, 1,700 houses, and further applications are in the pipeline. This is for a village. The neighbouring rural ward of Silverend and Cressing, which I represent and which has been referred to tonight in respect of the health centre, has planning permission for 1,300 houses, and there are allocations and applications for another 700. Therefore, these 2 rural wards are looking at 3,100 consents and allocations, which equates to more than 20% of the entire local plan allocation of 14,000, and if all the applications were granted, more than 30%. This is unsustainable. We were told throughout the process of the local plan that the villages would not be required to take high volumes of development, but they are. For this site, we have a very clear policy position. This site is in the countryside. It is outside the Kelvin village envelope. It was rejected from the Section 2 plan by members of this council, and yet once again we are being recommended to set aside that evidence decision. Members who were in the previous 4-year period may remember that this site was, and the other site in Kelvin, which has gone ahead with a matter of significant discussion, and it was decided to leave this site out for very good reasons. The site is thus contrary to our existing plan, to the new local plan, which is now in an advanced stage, and the emerging Kelvin neighbourhood plan. Officers tell us in terms in this report that both the Section 2 local plan of Braintree District Council and the neighbourhood plan for Kelvin carry significant weight. This site is in an unsustainable location. Now, officers have attempted in the report to, the developers via the officers have attempted in the report to say that it's well located to the village. Anyone who knows Kelvin knows that it is not. The village of Kelvin has quite a well-defined centre of shops, a primary school, a health centre and the railway station. The primary school, which is clearly of importance because there will be children moving into this development if we grant it tonight, is 1,400 metres as the crow flies, and on hardened footpaths is 1,800 metres away. That is clearly a distance whereby many people will have to find powered means of getting to the school. Officers strangely comment, I would say, that it is more likely they will walk. Or more likely than what? I would say at that distance most parents will drive their children to school. If it's 400 metres away, I would say most would probably walk, but 1,800, most are going to drive it. We also have the location of this site, and again, anyone local knows this. Traffic comes off incredibly fast off the A12 slip road, in part because it's down a slope. So as they're coming into Kelvin, hardly anyone's doing 30 miles an hour, and right past the entrance to this site is a clear conflict position. No cycling route is provided for this site. So on other sites, we have been talking a lot in this committee about providing cycle routes. None is provided. And again, anyone who knows the area knows that what has been provided in Kelvin so far, in Fearing, are bicycles painted on the road. That is the cycling provision. It's pathetic. And then we come on to the issue of Kelvin High Street. Again, as anyone local knows, Kelvin High Street is highly congested, particularly at peak times, because of the on-street parking. And the on-street parking has to be there because many of the houses along there don't have their own car parking. We have the fact that there are identified harms, and thank you to the officer for updating us on 8 heritage assets, not 7, and it is stated that officers say this weighs heavily against the application. We also have a failure to communicate from Essex County Council on the matter of the protected minerals position. It says in the report that County Council didn't respond to the application on that matter. So although officers say, well, they don't think it's an issue, we don't know because the County Council hasn't told us. There's going to be a loss of trees and hedges, and that's uncertain because, quite remarkably, for an outline application, we don't know where the access points are. We know roughly where they are, but we don't know exactly where they are. So those are the main points I wanted to raise before coming on to the more detailed discussion on what I think this whole application hinges on, which is the medical centre. But the officers state in the conclusion that it's a finely balanced decision, and it's quite clear that they think the health centre is what swings it. I mean, I'm not going to ask officers to say, you know, what their view would be, but I suspect if this health centre wasn't in this application, the recommendation might be different. That's my reading of it. So let's look at its juxtaposition relative to the villages of Kelvin and Fearing. If you take the main oblong shape of Kelvin, which is where 90-odd% of the houses are, no one currently to the west of the existing GP surgery is more than 400 metres away from the surgery, and no one to the east is more than 800 metres away. And the vast majority of people, particularly elderly people who live in the more central parts of the village, are just a few hundred metres away from the existing doctor's surgery. If we grant this tonight, the existing doctor's surgery will close. So this isn't an additional provision, it's a replacement provision. And that would mean that no one within that block, the oblong block where most people live, would be closer than 700 metres from the doctor's surgery. The elderly people who live in the middle of the village would be roughly a kilometre away. So you go from them being able to, most of them being able to walk to the doctor's surgery to not being able to walk to the doctor's surgery. And clearly the position for Fearing is much worse. Now, interestingly, the report and the doctor referred to other villages benefiting from the health centre, and Rivenhall was discussed. Obviously, I live in Rivenhall, I'm chairman of the parish council, and have been the district councillor there for 22 years. We're not aware of any consultation whatsoever with anybody, any district councillors, any parish council or residents about whether this centre would be provided for Rivenhall residents. Now, that's not to say that some current Rivenhall residents don't go to the Kelvin surgery. I've no doubt they do, just as some of us are registered as I am at Silverend and others are registered in Whittam. But the idea that this new centre would become the sort of focus for Rivenhall residents is frankly ridiculous. There is also no public transport between Rivenhall and Kelvin. Buses can't get under the railway bridge, so there's no bus route. So I've looked at the distances. If you take the core of Rivenhall village, the main part of the village, it's currently it is 2.5 kilometres from Whittam town centre. The proposed new surgery here is 3 kilometres. It's further away. But the point I'm raising there is that officers saying here they're not aware of any other provision for a health centre, but their own department is talking to the owner of the Newlands precinct about a new health centre in Whittam town centre. That would clearly be the main draw for people who live particularly on that side of Rivenhall and North Whittam, not a new provision in Kelvin. So I think I wouldn't go as far as to say it's a red herring, but it's certainly not anywhere near as straightforward as has been said. Now, that's not to say Kelvin and Fearing doesn't need a new health centre. Clearly, many people have said that, even those who are objecting to this. But I think the point is this is the wrong location. It's going to disadvantage in terms of access almost everybody who lives in the current main areas of Kelvin and Fearing. So, Madam Chairman, I think we've got more than enough grounds to refuse this application. I don't think we need to hang this entirely on the health centre issue. If we don't grant this, I can't believe the NHS is going to close the existing provision in Kelvin. What needs to happen there is a wider conversation about what's best for the area. And I would argue a wider conversation about what's best for all the villages in the area, which we're not currently having. So I would therefore move refusal of this application on 3 main grounds. Firstly, the clear policy grounds that this is contrary to the local plan and the emerging Kelvin neighbourhood plan. Secondly, on the harm to 8 heritage assets. And thirdly, unsustainable location. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Does find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Beavers, and you did indicate you wish to speak. Would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm happy to second the refusal of the application. I'm coming from a slightly different angle to Councillor Abbott, although I don't disagree with a lot of what Councillor Abbott has said. And I just wondered whether the officers could give me a little bit more clarity on what I think I'm looking at and reading as well, if I may. Just before we do that, I wanted to thank Chris Padgey for the report. I think it was really well written and very inclusive of the opportunity that could come from a site such as this. And I wanted to thank Matthew also for his presentation, because I think it was really sort of quite deep and very detailed, and that really helped as well. I've got a couple of stumbling blocks which I wanted to talk through and then just come to my main area of concern. But if I'm reading this right, there are actual local policies supporting the application insofar as the neighbourhood plan cited at page 35 and 23, where it says that the creation of a new and improved health facility within the village would be encouraged, providing a high standard of care was provided. And then it goes on to say about policies go on to state that further new residential development above the local plan requirements would be supported where it's demonstrated that provision of necessary infrastructure can be achieved in a timely and phased manner. So from that point of view, there seems to be some local support, clearly, because it's a neighbourhood plan and they would have gone through a detailed plan and a referendum. I understand as well from what I'm reading, the opportunity from the site, but this is my stumbling block. I think initially we were saying that we were going to put some form of business development opportunity, a work hub or something such as that, and then it was deemed that maybe that wasn't required. So we're going to look at putting another 50 homes on the site. I just wonder, and I wonder whether Matthew could take me back to that drawing, please, if we could have another look at the medical centre. And I appreciate at this stage you're saying that it's not, a full plan, but what you also said is that negotiations are quite advanced. And my stumbling block is parking. And I have a real issue about this and some knowledge as well because of a similar site to this in my own ward. And it seems to me that around our district that one of the key areas when we are putting in new facilities is around parking. And I appreciate this is an outlining planning permission, but what I would have wanted to have heard from our officers this evening is that we're not going to go ahead with the business facility stroke hub, but we are going to be allowed to allocate more land for parking. Now, Councillor Abbott made the point that to get to this piece of land isn't particularly easy and people are going to have to travel some distance around. Again, a very, very similar setup to what is going on in the Hedinghams. And I can tell you at the moment that the providers of that centre are now going round talking to the library, talking to other users around the village to find extra parking because they don't feel that the site is delivering. Now, what I'm seeing here is that if we allow this to go ahead this evening, we're not going to find the extra parking, and that really worries me because it is a site, from what Councillor Abbott said and from what I understand and know of the area, outside of the village. So if there wasn't enough parking, where's that going to come from? And that's why I'm going to refuse the application this evening, because I just think that more thought needs to go into this area and that it needs to come back to us, because where are these cars going to park? Because my experience of these health facilities, and we had a brilliant, or start of a brilliant debate in this chamber only last evening about the importance of local health facilities and primary care in our district, and all of that I absolutely support and appreciate. but it's the logistics of delivering a health centre and agreeing something tonight when I don't feel enough land is being put by. And in fact, what I will say is this, members, that when we did build out the work hub in the Hedinghams, which is going to take in 2 Hedinghams and the Eldhams, the local residents actually thought that the health hub was the facility and that there was going to be lots and lots of parking. And now the residents are saying that if that hub wasn't there, it could have been parking. And it really worries me that we're now going to see potential parking out on this main road and around the estate roads. And I don't think that's what the residents will be signing up for when they buy these properties. So just in summary, Madam Chairman, I feel that on parking grounds alone that I'm not getting enough information. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Beavers. Before I go back to Matthew to ask him to respond to your thing, I don't want to offend you, and I know you're new to our committee, but I really would like to give credit to the right person. This report was prepared by Matthew, and when the reports come to us, it says who the case officer is. It's the case officer that prepares the report and does the work.
Thank you.
I just want the right person to have the credit. Matthew, would you like to respond, please?
Thank you very much, and I'm humbled. Thank you, Councillor Beavers. Yes, just to pick up on a couple of your points. I think the first thing to note is that the application is for all matters reserved. So the health centre and the supporting drawings and the care home in the early years could all come forward in a completely different manner to what is shown, other than obviously the principles of the tree-lined streets and the parking rhythmic trees, etc. So at the moment we don't actually know for certain how many spaces would actually be provided. But on the flip side to that, these proposals were, the health centre in particular was developed with the clinical commissioning group and actually delivers, I think it's 32 spaces, which is actually what their requirement would be on the site. And actually it's quite unusual in this position that the retail as well on the opposite side of the road, if that's where it was to be located, would clearly offer an alternative to parking if spaces are short. Obviously, as I say, the application is outlined at this stage, so we don't actually know the details, but certainly there is space there, and there could be space in the retail if necessary for people to park their cars. So I'll take your point, but I think that's how I would respond. Don't know if Neil or Chris want to comment on that as well. Thank you.
Did you want to come back?
Yeah, if that's okay, just to add to what Matt was saying. So we've got to be a little bit careful how much we rely on the plans that the CCG have provided and the developers provided us. So the discussion between the CCG, the practice and the developer is quite advanced in terms of the health centre, but we're not approving it. But just to try and give Councillor Beavis some context, as Matt said, the layout, the site area that's identified there indicates the provision of 32 parking spaces. The parking standards of the council would be that you have one parking space per full-time member of staff, and you have 3 parking spaces per consulting room. Just having a look at the consulting room, just to confirm, I was giving you the right figures. So we've got 5 consulting rooms shown and 2 treatment rooms, so that's 7 rooms in total. So that'd be 21 spaces. Dr. Gill in the letter referred to the number of staff. I think they've got a team of 20 in total, but that includes part-time staff. But I think when we've looked at the figures overall, the 32 spaces is there or where it needs to be in terms of parking standards. But I would agree with what Matt was saying. As you can see, the idea of the community hub and having the mix of uses together is that you do have additional parking nearby. So there is a sort of retail centre of some description on the other side of the road being shown. So there would be additional parking there. So it wouldn't have to be necessarily on the streets. And what we're doing with the community hub is we're identifying a parcel of land overall where these mix of uses is going to go, but we're not actually having a plan which defines precisely where they go. So if the discussions with the CCG and the practice and the planning department and everybody else, when it goes forward, indicates there should be additional parking provided for the health centre, then there is some flex within that. You can see that this is to give an indication of how the uses will work together, and we're comfortable there's sufficient land there. But there needs to be some flex so that there's, I don't know, slightly less landscaping space perhaps around the retail centre, slightly more area given to the health centre to provide for parking, and there is that ability. I think the other thing to bear in mind, though, is that, yeah, this does have to be paid for. So if there's more land which is being taken and more parking spaces being provided, then we do have to bear in mind that the CCG and the practice are going to end up picking up potentially the cost for an additional rent. So it always needs to be what's sustainable for the NHS as well. But hopefully that gives a bit of additional comfort. So it certainly has been considered. And whilst we're not approving it tonight, we think there's an appropriate amount of land there to provide an appropriate level of parking with reference to the size of the facility that's been provided and the council's parking standards.
Thank you very much, Neil. Thank you. Members, anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Mrs Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I don't think this is the easiest application to determine. I realise that objectors, and by the way, I know that they couldn't read their own statements tonight, and Alison did an excellent job of reading them. I thought they made really good points. They were very well thought out, very well considered statements. The objectors, I suspect, would say, well, this is easy to make a decision on because it's an unallocated site and you've got a 5-year supply. Well, would that, life was that simple for a planning committee, because it isn't. I think with the 5-year supply, yes, we do have one. It's marginal, 5.27 years. And at a recent appeal, an inspector declared that we didn't have a 5-year supply. Now, I know we are pushing back strongly on that. We think she was incorrect. But it makes me a bit nervous. It does leave us, I think, a bit uncertain as to what other inspectors might say over the next few months. It's not a massively strong position. And I think playing devil's advocate for a moment about what an inspector might say if we were to refuse this, an inspector would look at the benefits, and they are considerable. There's a new medical centre, and I'll come back to that in a minute, a couple of retail spaces, a care home, and we know that those are needed in this district, early years and childcare facility, and 120 affordable homes, which is a significant number. So there is a lot to be said, a lot in its favour, which an inspector would most certainly take account of. Yes, it's an unallocated site, and I think that is probably one of the strongest points that we have against it. I think there are a few other things which are less strong in terms of if we were looking for reasons for refusal. The effect on listed buildings. I know that one of the 3 reasons that Councillor Abbott gave, I think, was harm to heritage assets, but they are identified in the report as being at the lower end of the scale, 4 at the middle end and 4 at the lower end. So I'm not sure that an inspector would consider that particularly strong. Landscape, there is harm, but there is less harm, I think, than we've seen on other developments. There's every chance that at least one hedge or a strip of hedge that will have to come down could be relocated, replanted. I'm not sure what the correct terminology is. So I think there is less harm than we've seen, as I say, on other sites. With regards to the health centre, I do take very due regard to what the GP said, Dr. Gill said. I mean, he works there, so obviously he knows what he's talking about, and he's saying the current surgery is not fit for purpose. And I think, there is obviously a lot to commend having a new surgery, and it appears that, it appears that there are no other suitable sites. I'm going to take everybody's word for it that has been looked at. But I do have concerns. I share the concern of the objectors about its location in terms of access for the residents of Kelvedon and Fearing. It's not a particularly great walkable distance, particularly if you live at the other end of the villages. And, you know, if you are elderly, well, you don't even have to be elderly to have trouble walking, quite frankly. So I do think that's a genuine concern. Having said that, I'm not sure quite where else on the site you put it. You know, this has been fairly well thought out. I know it's an outline application, but it forms part of the sort of community hub. So of the three reasons for refusal that Councillor Abbott put forward, contrary to the local plan, yes, it is, and it is an unallocated site, and I think there's no getting around that. Harm to heritage assets, I say, I'm not sure that is particularly strong. Unsustainable location. I mean, I've driven down that road. I've come off the A12 and driven down that road more times than I can possibly think of. And yes, people do tend to come off there fast. I make an enormous effort not to. It is a fast bit of road, and as far as walking and footpaths and so on are concerned, it's not great. I do think this is really, really difficult. I am inclined to support refusal, not because I'm saying that, well, Kelvedon's taken more than its fair share, it doesn't need any more, because actually that's an argument I firmly believe won't wash with an inspector. There are umpteen places around the district that could say, well, we've got lots of new housing, we don't want any more, we don't need any more. So that's not, just for clarity, for objectors, who particularly those listening into the meeting, that's not what I'm saying. We have to, if we're going to refuse this, it has to be on pretty strong planning grounds. It is an unallocated site. I do think there are issues around access to it, particularly for residents of Kelvedon and Fearing. There are a lot of benefits that come with it, which is why I'm slightly nervous about it. But overall, I am inclined to support refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mrs Wilson.
Thank you. Yes, and I would as well. I have to say, slightly historically, I am sad enough to have been around when the main A12 went through Kelvedon, Fearing. We didn't have a bypass. But it's always been an area of massive traffic. Trying to cross the road and everything else in Kelvedon is horrendous. And I think also I'd like to know whether the figures that were quoted on page 20 have taken into account all the other houses and things that they're actually proposing to build in that area. There's quite a lot of building work going on. And I do think that to expect people, elderly or not, I couldn't do it, to walk down that road to get to a doctor's surgery is just totally unrealistic. You know, the centre of Kelvedon is a problem. There's always traffic parked there. You've got a train station that's getting busier and busier. And all the villages in the area, I know Councillor Abbott said about Rivenhall, but Coggeshall's the same. It has a mainline station, cars whiz around. And if there's an accident on the A12, where does the traffic go? Straight through Kelvedon. It just happens all the time. So, no, I don't think it's a good idea, and I don't think it's the right place for a surgery.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Abbott, and then I come to Councillor Mann.
Yeah, just to help on information, Madam Chairman, on my second reason, Councillor Spray said she wasn't sure. I quoted the officers who said that cumulatively the impact on the 8 heritage assets was, quote, weighed heavily against the application. So although individually they might, index significance
That is,
matrix. That's, I was quoting the officers, so I wouldn't have put that forward as a reason for refusal unless officers hadn't used those words.
Thank you. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam
Councillor
Chairman.
Wilson, can you switch your mic off?
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've heard from me on the principal development in some sites before. I believe we've made the hard decisions to achieve a 5-year land supply, and therefore, as an authority that prides itself on being plan-led, shouldn't be considering for approval sites that are not within the village development area, not within Section 2 of the Emerging Local Plan, not in the current local plan. To my mind, those things alone rule the site out. I'm not saying that it is a site that cannot be developed or will never be developed. And in this proposal, there are some very attractive features, but we don't need to develop it now. And we haven't planned as an authority to develop it now. And I continue to be a little of a loss why we do get sort of recommendations on site like this to proceed with them. It is complicated by the health centre, and perhaps that is being used too much as a lever. Perhaps we are given too great a weight to the need for it. Certainly, the area badly needs a new facility, but I don't think that it is necessarily here, and that we shouldn't hang sort of our decision for up to 300 houses around that point, which I think we've come close to doing. But you know, that put simply as I can, this is, despite some attractive features, a speculative proposal that has been put before us as a committee.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There are undoubtedly some strong benefits to this application, which has been listed by Matthew and also mentioned by Councillor Spray, and quite substantial benefits: the care home, retail centre, which we don't normally see as part of the housing development, and also a new surgery. But having said that, I have found this decision really quite difficult, but my sort of gut instinct right at the very start was that this site was rejected in the local plan process in favour of another site, on top of a very substantial allocation of 1,000 homes in what is described as a growth area on effectively what is a village. What wasn't intended at that time was that if we chose one site over another, that we would end up granting permission for both. And I do think we need to look further ahead, in that there will come a time, and sadly in the not too distant future, when we'll have to start redrawing yet another plan and looking for more housing allocations. And I just think it's a mistake to start approving speculative applications when we are claiming that we do have a 5-year housing land supply and are Section 2 plan has been approved subject to main modifications. I've looked at those main modifications. I don't think anything really relate to housing allocations, not that I could see. So I sort of feel we've got to the point where we do need to sort of stand by our local plan. The thing obviously that is, you know, of the most significant benefit is the health centre, and you know I've heard what Dr. Gill was saying, and it would be you know, fantastic for Kelvin to have a new health centre. I do think it's important that it's accessible to the elderly. I think, you know, that's important, very important consideration. But there is another site which is allocated in Fearing, which presumably it would be possible for the CCG to come to some negotiations with the owner of that site, I presume, to make provision there. So I don't think necessarily, apart from timing-wise, whether that is significant enough to tip it in favour of granting permission. So I'm in agreement with my other colleagues who have spoken so far. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Well, members, it has been moved and seconded that we refuse this application. I'm going to put that to the vote first. All those... Oh, sorry.
Sorry, could I just...
Yeah.
Apologies, Councillor Cascade. I just wanted to come back just in terms of Councillor Abbott's suggested reasons. Just, if I may, just some comments, observations, and maybe some advice for members to consider before you take the votes on the application. So, if I understand correctly, the first was on pure policy grounds, contrary to adopted plan, emerging local plan, and neighbourhood plan. Could we just clarify in terms of the specific policies, Councillor Abbott, that you're looking at there in terms of the policy? I assume you're talking RLP2, CS5.
Yeah, as stated in the report.
Okay, and then I think the second ground that you mentioned in terms of heritage, that's very clear, and you're right in terms of the quotations in terms of from the report on that. Just in relation to the third one, my notes simply said unsustainable location. Just an observation and an advice from officers, because obviously it's members' decision here this evening as to, in terms of the decision on the application. I'm just very mindful the site itself is located in a key service village. So in terms of using the term and referring to sustainability, one of the tests of that is the access to services, facilities. The hierarchy of the settlement is indicated as a key service village. My only observation from the debate and members' comments this evening is there's been a lot of discussion around the location of the site in relation to the rest of the village in terms of almost a disconnect from the village. I just query the reference to unsustainable, because that, should members decide to refuse the application, would obviously become a key point that we would need to substantiate at appeal. So I just make that pure point, and it would just be remiss of me as well, just given a couple of comments on 5-year housing land supply. I know members are fully aware of this from the report, but yeah, just to underline in terms of the position, it is very marginal, and we've got a public inquiry that started today on another speculative scheme in the district, which we were seeking to resist development, and housing land supply again is a matter that is being tested at that public inquiry. So I just do need to underline to members that this is not a closed issue. We are holding our position that our supply is 5.27, but it is a matter that is under considerable pressure and attack from the appeal process at the moment. So we're waiting on the outcome of one appeal. One has just started. But hopefully those comments are helpful, but that just my observations in terms of the suggested reasons for refusal.
So I think 1 and 2 we're happy with in terms of what we're doing. With 3, it wasn't so much around the fact that it's next to a key service village. It was around the fact there's specific distances involved to facilities, and especially the school. It's even further to the railway station. Obviously, the railway station must be close to plus 2 kilometres out. But also the fact that surgery is being moved from a sustainable location to an unsustainable. I don't know how you frame that in terms of wording in a refusal. I mean, are you thinking that we shouldn't include that?
So I can only give advice, Councillor Abbott, on this. I mean, in terms of the facilities, I think I think it was just as I said, the notes that I took down was unsustainable location, and that automatically raises a concern just in terms of the high
Well, how about
settlement. But
reliance on motor vehicles then, something around that, because of those distances?
again, I mean, I suppose my advice on that would perhaps be to focus on the disconnect of the site to readily access those facilities, or that it's at the farthest end of the village, away from some of those facilities, if members feel strongly on that. I think the point about the GP surgery is quite difficult, because obviously the proposal is not to relocate. The proposal is to provide a new facility. That would be the effect of it. So I think that becomes quite difficult. But if you specifically wish to mention railway, school and other particular facilities, then obviously that could be weaved into a refusal. But my main concern was just with the reference to sustainability in terms of the location, given that Kelvin and Fearing do have a range of facilities.
Councillor, you're dying to be his assistant.
Well, when sort of Councillor Abbott laid out his 3 points, I thought, in particularly the third one, having read many appeal decisions, the third one with the mention of sustainability would not hold. So I think we're being given very sound advice. It will be useful to have a third reason for refusal. And the word disconnect, we've used that, for example, a few times in Gosfield, and it's worked successfully. That this is a wrong position for the expansion of social infrastructure, because it doesn't relate well to the sort of the layout of the rest of the community. So something along those lines, I would agree, would probably be stronger.
I'm happy with that.
Are we all happy now? Yep. You're happy with this disconnected with such things as the station and the store, etc. Well, members, it has been moved and seconded that we refuse this application. All those in favour of refusal? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against refusal? Abstentions? Councillor Horner, I didn't see your hand for anything. Oh, thank you. I couldn't see past it. Thank you. Now, that application has been refused. Thank you, members. Thank you very much indeed. Have we had any joy with connecting with?
We'll try one more time. In a
I feel we need to contact Councillor Walsh, because his statement is nearly 10 minutes long, and I don't know what he would want us to cut out. And it'd be rather embarrassing for me to decide what we cut out. I did tell him it was too long. He did get the message, but he hasn't come back with a shorter one. So I'm in rather a confused state over this. Councillor Johnson.
Can I just make a comment, Madam Chairman? We've had a raft of verbal information this evening, but I have to say, from my point of view, some of it was extremely difficult to read on the screens. It seems to be out of sync. I mean, we've had this so many times. There's a lot of important information being provided by the officers, but to be quite frank, it was meaningless to me. Just a comment.
Thank you. At least you can see that one, which is the best screen of the three. That one is. So I don't know if we could just contact Councillor Walsh and ask him what he wants us to do. I mean, you can message him. In the meantime, I will have to get Alison then. The first person wishing to make a statement on the next application, which is application number 21018784, Land East to Periwinkle Hall, Links Road, Perry Green, Bradwell. And this can be found on pages 106 to 142. And the first person wishing to make a statement is Miss Sally Baines, and she's going to be speaking on behalf of Mr. N. Wells, and she is an objector. So I don't know if we can try contacting her, but we do have her statement.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Ms Baines, are you able to hear us? Can you just confirm? I can't see you on the screen at the moment. I don't know if you can put your video on just to nod if you can hear us, or send a message if not. It doesn't. We can't hear you at the moment.
She's there now.
Okay.
No, she's done there.
Okay. We can't hear you, but I believe you can hear us at the moment.
Well, I'll ask Alison to read Miss Baines' statement, which is on behalf of her father, Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I speak on behalf of my father, Norris Wells, who has lived at 2 Jubilee Villas, Links Road, for the last 65 years. Low Carbon have promoted this development as a solar farm set amongst a landscape of grassland, wildflowers, honeybees and grazing sheep, with new hedgerow, natural living in harmony with a solar farm. The reality is quite the opposite. This is an industrial solar farm station on a major scale, 125 acres, a massive sea of solar panels sited in a beautiful location, destroying wildlife habitats and agricultural production. This development is not about renewable energy, it is an on-trend green scheme for private profit, making a lot of money for landowners and low-carbon investors without any consideration to wildlife, the local farmer, employment, residents and visitors who choose to enjoy the fantastic rural benefits. If anyone in the committee has visited or who knows the area of Perry Green will surely agree that this beautiful area of countryside should not be considered for an industrial solar power station. Many of the expert reports appear to have no objections, which must be questioned. I can only assume these have been done as desktop surveys using the internet. To appreciate the true value of this natural area and the reasons why this site is unsuitable, you need to see it with your own eyes. This development will be totally counterproductive, sacrificing good, productive, Grade 2 agricultural land for an out-of-character power station. In 40 years, when decommissioned, this land will not be fit for farming. This would be a total waste of existing rich and natural resources which need not be exploited. Why is this even being considered? This is an ill-conceived attempt by Low Carbon to convert quality agricultural land of recognised character into a commercial-scale solar power station. Government guidelines seek to preserve the agricultural use of such land. Alternative sites must be considered. The visual impact of this development will dominate and dramatically change the character of this area of green landscape. The views from my father's home, the visible zones 5, 6, 7 and 8 are undulating and will be extremely imposing even with additional screening. Deciduous hedging will offer inadequate and minimal screening for at least 6 months of the year. My father sees this as living with a POW concentration camp, rows of black panels, wire fencing, security cameras and container substations only 70 metres from his front door. The historic Essex Way, a walk of national significance, will share the same views, funnelled between 2-metre-high security fencing with 3-metre-high solar panels on both sides, highly conducive to enjoying a countryside walk. My father is totally bereaved by the thought of losing this beautiful rural setting, which will be destroyed if this application is granted. That's the end of the statement.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you, Ms Baines, for sending your statement in. The next person wishing to make a statement is Mrs Catherine Evans, who is speaking on behalf of the Ramblers Association.
I'll just try and make connection. Mrs Evans, can you confirm if you can hear us? Okay, could just nod if you can hear us. Hello, yes. Thank you very much. We'll have to ask Alison again, I'm afraid.
Alison, will you read?
Thank you. On balance, this solar farm development is objected to on behalf of the Ramblers due to the number of public rights-of-way affected and because of the potential conflict with the proposed new route for the A120. The preferred route, option D, for the proposed new A120 to A12 route passes east of Links Wood through the proposed solar farm development zones 2, 3 and 4. If granted, this development would therefore compromise the preferred A120 route. The parameters used when considering alternative sites seems very restrictive and have resulted in sites south of the A120 with fewer public rights-of-way and nearer the Braintree substation being ruled out. Land on the old Rivenall Airfield Bradford Quarry site has also not been considered. These sites are less rural, so solar panels would be less intrusive. Paragraph 98 of the National Planning Policy Framework says that planning policies and decisions should protect and enhance public rights-of-way and access, including taking opportunities to provide better facilities for users. No public rights-of-way improvements are being provided, quite the reverse, with the adverse visual effects on walkers being noted in the documentation. The proposed 50-hectare solar farm site spreads over several fields in a quiet rural location. The development will adversely affect several Bradwell public footpaths 62, 63, 29, 30 and 32. All of these footpaths, except for Bradwell footpath 62, form part of the Essex Way, a county-promoted route. The vehicular access routes cross the public footpaths 5 times, and as noted by county highways, a vehicular route runs partly along the line at Bradwell footpath 30. The late full deposition on behalf of the Ramblers attached includes several minor diversion proposals, often onto existing walked desire line route that will somewhat mitigate the visual effect of walking alongside and between fields of solar panels. On behalf of the Ramblers, it is requested that this solar farm development in this location is refused. That's the end of the statement. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much for reading that, Alison. Thank you, Mrs. Evans, for submitting it. The next person wishing to have a statement read, because I'm sure we can't be able to connect with anyone now, is Councillor Anthony Dunn. He's chairman of Bradwell and Padderswick Parish Council. No, not.
Councillor Anthony Dunn, can I check if you can hear us, and are you able to try and speak to us? Hello. Okay, we can't hear you. Thank you for confirming, though. You can hear us.
I'm going to ask Alison to read this one as well, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Connectivity. You will see from the planner's report the solar farm would connect into the substation near to Galleys Corner via an underground cable within highway land, which would be installed to transfer the power generated into the electricity grid. Nowhere in this application, nor in the transport plan, nor in the report, nor in the conditions is any reference made to how the underground cable will actually materialise between the site and the Cressing substation. In correspondence with Bradwell with Padderswick Parish Council, Low Carbon have admitted this is an error on their part. This application is therefore incomplete. This correspondence has been forwarded to Braintree District Council by both the Parish Council and Councillor Walsh, but it has not been published on the planning portal. Why not? Yet excavation of Links Road, Borstie Road, Lanham Green Road, Ashes Road, Long Green, Galleys Corner Roundabout and the B1018 from Galleys Corner to the Cressing substation is likely to cause serious traffic disruption, leading to gridlock in and around Braintree. Nowhere is there any indication that Essex Highways and Highways England, now National Highways, have been asked for, let alone given permission, for an HV cable to be laid under highway land. Highways England have commented on the transport plan, but this only covers transport during construction on the site itself. It omits the need to dig up the roads from the site to the Cressing substation, including Galleys Corner and the B1018. The construction management plan only addresses construction on site. It does not address the construction of an underground HV cable from the site to the Cressing substation. The updated transport plan as supplied to Essex Highways did not include any reference to the need to lay an underground cable along Links Road, Borstie Road, Lanham Green Road, Ashes Road and Long Green. Again, the Highways Authority have neither been asked nor have given permission for an underground cable to be buried under highway land. Some of the landowners between the site and Cressing substation have stated that they will not allow the HV cable to go through their land, so the only option is highway land. To do any works to the highway, the developer would need a Section 50 licence with the Highway Authority. Why have the respective highway authorities not been asked whether they are likely to give Section 50 licences, and why has the planner not taken this into account? Until these aspects of the application have been properly submitted, and this last aspect thoroughly investigated by Essex Highways and National Highways, this application should be refused. Bradwell with Patterswick Parish Council comments on application 1878. Bradwell with Patterswick Parish Council is generally in favour of the production of clean energy, but we have serious concerns about this application. I will focus on benefit, cost and connectivity. Benefit. The planner's report states that the development would compromise solar panels estimated to generate 35 megawatts of renewable energy per year. According to UK Power, the average electricity use per household per year is 4.2 megawatts. So this installation will provide enough electricity for 8 dwellings. This cannot be claimed as a potential significant benefit. Cost. The planner's report states the proposal would also deliver moderate benefits by providing local employment opportunities in the construction phase and additional more limited employment opportunities during the operational phases, in addition to generally contributing to sustaining jobs in the wider solar power industry. The development is entirely within the boundaries of Bradwell and Cressing parishes. The development will make one gamekeeper redundant and homeless, and will remove the need for local agricultural labour. The construction phase lasts all of 18 weeks. It is highly unlikely it will provide any employment in Bradwell or Cressing. No employment benefit.
Alison, I think we're going to have to leave it there because it does extend quite a bit on, and I know members have all got the statement. Only you've gone past your 3 minutes, and we've still got a bit more, and I think we've all seen it, haven't we? Yes. Thank you. We now come on to Councillor Walsh. Do we know what he wants to do about his long statement?
Thank you, Chairman. I have sent Councillor Walsh a message, and he has come back with a few areas just to focus on in the statement. I will just try first to connect with Councillor Walsh just to see if he can hear us and read the statement himself. Councillor Walsh, can you just see if we can hear you? We can see, but we can't hear you still, I'm afraid. But I have got your note about focusing on those 3 points, so I'll just confirm with Alison. Alison, if you want, I can read it, but Councillor Walsh has just said to focus on points 1, 3 and 5.
Thank you.
3. That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Alison. We'll start with point 1.
Sorry, Chairman, do you want me to miss out the preamble? Or
I
go
think
straight
the preamble, yes.
Well,
we just I do the first about the personal comments.
These are personal comments from myself as the independent ward member. I'm also a former town planner, and I have been contacted by several residents who expressed concerns about this scheme. I've also approached Low Carbon on this scheme and discussed it with them, including asking questions when they outlined it to the parish council. I'll go straight to number 1. Planning and land use and an alternative. The applicants, in their letter of 4th of November to Bradwell and Patterswick Parish Council, refer to it as a solar project, Links Solar Farm, and this is the term commonly used to describe it. This is vague language and inaccurate in planning terms, and could mislead, as a farm is primarily a land use category for agricultural production, and farm is a term to describe something both normal and reasonable for a greenfield rural setting. This proposal is almost entirely for energy generation, and as such should be considered as quasi-industrial, if not industrial. Both officers and the committee might wish to consider such a scheme is needed now, and if it is indeed necessary in this area, given that Cressing nearby already has a solar project, and the plan for a very large 460 has Project Longfield, where some half of that scheme is within the BDC boundary. Has any consideration been given to the total supply and demand for electricity in our district, and what proportion of that total can and should reasonably be provided in our district with a constrained supply of undeveloped land by solar power generation? Even if it has been concluded that BDC should and does need to get more of its electricity supply from solar panels, something I would be indeed open to, what consideration has been given to siting the required number of photovoltaic panels on the roofs of industrial or warehouse buildings or on brownfield sites? Furthermore, consideration should be given to locating it on a very nearby site just to the east on significantly lower quality agricultural land, i.e. the site of the Essex Quarry land on near the site of the old Rivenal airfield, stretching down to the Cuthedge Lane towards the Blackwater River. This site is very close to the existing quarry and proposed incinerator and has the added advantage of being lower lying in elevation and so would have much less visual and landscape impact. This nearby alternative is more suitable for a quasi-industrial power generation land use as it has very thin topsoil, which, while it is ideal for wildflowers, is of lower grade 4 or 5 agricultural quality. If consideration has not been given to both of the above alternate sources of solar power generation, such a scheme is at least premature, if not unnecessary. Point 3, ecology and landscape. The application site has significant, if not sustainable, ecological value. It contains or has regular sightings of kestrels, peregrines, songbirds, tits, finches, magpies, kites, etc. And furthermore, it is a nesting bird for red-listed yellowhammers, skylarks and turtle doves, if not other birds. This is essentially topical as a report just published by the Birds of Conservation Concern, a coalition of government and wildlife bodies and bird charities, report that the number of species now given the highest conservation concern, commonly known as the Red List, has doubled from 36 to 70 and now represents more than a quarter of Britain's 245 bird species, referenced the Guardian of the 1st of December. More than a quarter of UK bird species at risk. This wide variety of birds on or using this area benefit from the food put out for the pheasants and partridges encouraged in connection with the long-standing shoot, which is also linked to the fact that hedgerows on part of the site are left to grow more naturally. There is a reported concern or claim that some birds are confused by the reflective nature of solar panels, mistaking them for water harm themselves by diving and crashing into the hard-surfaced rigid solar panels. The site also surrounds the highly regarded and reportedly ancient woodland of Lynx Wood, and by doing so on both of its main north-south boundaries, it would effectively envelop and substantively diminish, if not environmentally damage, the swamp, the curtilage of the overall context of this valued wood. I note with concern that planning officers at BDC undertook a scoping exercise and utilised available discretion not to require a full environmental impact assessment prior to the application being fully analysed. If officers are minded to recommend planning approval, any such should not be approved or accepted by members until detailed consideration is given to requiring the EIA, given the ecological, agricultural, landscape and rural amenity heritage of this valued site. Notwithstanding this, I hereby request, using freedom of information rights, a copy of all reports, notes or emails, etc., used in deciding not to commission or require a full EIA. The landscape of this scheme has evolved gradually and incrementally over centuries, and its formal or natural character is still coherent and visible and appreciable, as it has not suffered from or been affected by much modern development, apart from, example, a few houses, the construction of Links Road and the parish church to the north-east. While the landscape may not be of national significance, it is indeed largely green and relatively undisrupted farmland with extant trees and hedgerows. This landscape is valued by local and nearby residents, by those passing through the area on foot or by bicycle, if not by car, and especially by local and other walkers using the nationally significant Essex Way, which directly abuts the southern boundary of this scheme and whose outlook would be diminished by it. The amenity, coherence and essentially rural...
Alison, I think you'll have to go to the conclusion now because we've gone to about at least 6 minutes already, and that we did stop the previous parish councillor. So can we just go to the conclusion, please?
Conclusion. I request members of this committee, as custodians of our natural and man-made environment, to considered declining this proposal as the disbenefits from its scale, nature and location, as outlined above, in terms of energy supply and demand, ecological, agricultural, heritage and landscape, etc. impacts, combined with the loss of amenity to residents and visitors significantly, if not substantially, outweigh the renewable energy gain. This is especially so given nearby alternative greenfield sites are available and better suited to hosting a large number of metal-framed solar panels of a quasi-industrial project, and it appears that the potential capacity of siting panels on existing commercial premises or brownfield sites has not been assessed. Were members to be minded to approve this scheme, I submit it would be premature to do so now until it is clear how the highway and access issues for the HV cables can actually be reasonably provided, as at least one of the 4 farmers will not grant access over their land, nor is it clear how it can be done by using the road network without significant or major disruption to important nearby roads, if not to the town centre. Given the existence of the nearby Cressing solar facility and the proposed much larger scheme at Longfield, it would be premature for the committee to decide this proposal now until it has completed its supplementary planning document to guide and inform policy in this crucial matter, where further schemes can be anticipated. Any such decision could have irrevocable and potentially permanent implications for this valued part of our generally historic landscape and with a cherished farming tradition. That's the end of the statement.
Thank you very much, Alison. Thank you. We were expecting one more statement from Mr. James Hartley Bond, who is the applicant, but unfortunately he didn't send us a...
Chairman, I have received it in the last
you've
few
received
minutes.
it?
Yes, so Alison, are you happy to... I will just check as well that we can hear, whether we can hear Mr. Hartley Bond. Hello there, can you confirm if you can hear us? Hello. No, we can't hear you, but thank you for confirming. We know you can hear us. That's great, thank you.
So this is the statement by Mr. James Hartley Bond, who is the applicant for this application. I'm sure Alison will need a rest.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I note the comments of the previous speakers. As I only have 3 minutes, it's not possible to respond point by point. However, if members wish, I'd be happy to take questions if permitted. What I can say is that we have carried out a thorough consultation, worked with local residents to reduce impacts, and we have been pleasantly surprised that for a project with such large benefits in terms of power generation, there have been so few objections. Your officer has also carefully considered all of the issues and has reached a strong recommendation for approval, and there are no evident planning grounds for refusal. This is backed up by there being no objections from technical consultees on landscape, ecology, heritage, highways, flooding and other grounds. With that, I'd like to turn our attention to why this proposal matters. It has unlikely escaped people's attention that we are fighting a climate crisis and an energy security crisis at the same time. We have had a raft of international and national commitments recently to bring forward measures to tackle the climate crisis. One of the most significant is a commitment to fully decarbonise our electrical system by 2035. To achieve this, solar farms such as this are necessary. This is not coming from us. Today, the UK government opened its programme to procure a minimum of the equivalent of 50 projects similar to this, and possibly over 100, to connect in the next 2 years. We have heard that solar should only be on roofs. Those comments are part right. Solar should absolutely be on roofs, but it cannot be limited to that if we are serious about decarbonising our electricity network. The government knows this, which is why it has opened its programme today and to procure exactly this type of project. To bring this back to the local, this project will power approximately 18% of the district's homes, around 11,600, which when added to existing solar projects in your area takes the district to around 35% of homes powered by solar, a milestone on the journey to reaching the Council's own climate emergency targets. The second crisis is the huge rise in wholesale gas prices, which we have little control over, as the supply and price is largely determined by foreign entities. We are only just seeing the start of this impact on people's energy bills. Energy security is going to become much more important. This project aims in solving both of these crises, decarbonisation and energy security. Councillors, you have before you today a project with officer support that can make a huge difference to these crises. I urge you to support your officer's recommendation and to approve the application. That's the end of the statement. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Alison. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Hartley-Bond, for getting a statement through to us. That brings us to the end of statements this evening, members, and we'll now go to the presentation, which is going to be made by Matthew. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This one is a bit shorter. We have before us this evening an application to construct and operate a solar photovoltaic farm with associated battery storage and other infrastructure, including inverters, security cameras, fencing, access tracks and landscaping. And this is the land east of Peerwinkle Hall, Links Road, Peregrine, Bradwell. Okay, so this is the red line site plan. So the red line of the actual site itself is over here. So this is where the panels will go. And this red line is the much talked about cable connection route to the substation, which is at Galleys Corner. You've probably seen it. Just to, at this point, it probably is worth picking up on those points that were made. About how this would come forward, and there's questions about this cable, and potentially putting it on other land, and I think it's to set it out to make sure it's absolutely clear. The red line is over highway land, which is where the cable is proposed to go. So it's not proposed to go on anyone else's land. I understand the applicant has entered into discussions with other landowners to see if there is an option to move the cable away from the highway, but they acknowledge that wouldn't be able to form part of this application because that would mean changing the red line. So essentially what's before members tonight is correct in that the red line goes over the highway boundary, which is where the cable is supposed to go. Just in terms of how that would come about, so I understand that would be through trenching with mobile works in different areas, so the whole route wouldn't be closed at one go. It would more than likely be that they do a section at a time, probably nighttime works, but it's something that would be secured with Essex Highways through the Section 50. So it's not really something that we can control as a district council, but for this application it does show it going on the highway land to the substation. So as far as for consideration this evening, it is a correct proposal, and members can take a view on that if in terms of the application. It's not an invalid application for that reason. Okay. Right, so the site is 50.49 hectares. Previously it included more parcels over on the east side, which totaled it to 65.8 hectares, but that was removed due to heritage concerns. The plan that's before you is the development zone plan. So this is using what's called the Rochdale envelope, which sets out the maximum development zones for the panels. So obviously the rationale is set out in the report, as members will have read, but the gist of it is that the approach allows for flexibility. So it sets out the maximum parameters, and then if it's approved, when a contractor comes onto the site in a year or two or however long to build the panels, it would then be able to be built through discharge of condition to secure the details in the most effective way to maximise the energy generation, but stay within obviously the parameters that are being proposed to be secured here in these development zones that you can see before you, of which there are 8. Okay. And actually, I'll just confirm as well that there is no tree loss as part of this application or hedge loss. Right, so this is the access plan. So there's only one access onto the development. This plan actually would be for approval, showing that it can achieve visibility, which was something that Essex always did query. The site would be connected by internal access roads, which obviously the details of which will come forward at a later stage. But the visibility can be secured in highway land. There is this small sliver of highway land just here at the bottom. It looks like it's not there because it's inside the outside the red line, but it is there. So the visibility is correct, and that's something that was discussed. Just some photos just to sort of take you through the various points. So again, done a bit of a reference plan just to show you roughly where the photo was taken. So this is by where the site access would be. And then this picture here is just arrows. This is looking down the parcel. And then two pictures from two different locations showing Linkswood. So you've got the first one, which is this one, which looks at this side of it, which Linkswood's here. And then this photo is kind of looking from about here to this side of Linkswood. I've done my best to sort of amalgamate the pictures, but obviously it is a big site. So again, the top two pictures are the black star, so that's sort of looking at two different parcels, and this is the Essex Way that sort of would run through the middle of the development parcels and runs along here, up and out like that. So the development wouldn't be on the parcels as is set out in the report. And the green star is looking out to this more northern field up here. And then you've got some photos from the other end of the site. So this one here at the top is the green one looking at that sort of top development parcel, and then you've got the other two photos which show the Jubilee plantation and either side of that, basically. So this is an indicative site layout of how it could come forward. So it does. The access would require crossing public rights of way, which is fine. Obviously, you'd expect that with existing farm vehicles use the farm anyway, and we'd make sure that through the discharge of condition that there wouldn't be any sort of access actually on the public right of way or sort of immediately adjacent to it. The parameter, the development zone plan does seek to secure the areas where that potentially will go. So that would be fixed and not affect the public rights of way. And as I've set out in the report, there is a buffer being introduced, like 15 metres, for example, from fence to fence, if you like, or rail to rail, whatever the enclosure is that they put forward. And then landscape strategies is a document for approval, so it's just setting out the sort of key points that the development will look to secure. So 3 metre hedges around the site to help screen the development, and gapping up existing hedgerows and wildflower areas to enhance biodiversity. Okay, I've done another quite crude annotation of a plan. So the sort of crosses are the sort of outline of where the parcels are. So hopefully that gives members a flavour of where then these listed buildings, which are in the blue, and that's a dark blue because that's a grade 1 listed building. The rest are grade 2, and also the affected neighbours, as set out in the report. So Links Cottage, Romans, and Green Pastures down here. So that's just to give you a flavour of really where these affected properties are, and obviously help their decision making, or help your decision making. I've just got a few little slides of indicative panel arrangements, obviously to absorb the sun, and then there's some indicative plans of the substation, the inverter, how that might look, and again the battery container as well. So coming back to the planning balance, so we the development would result in a high level of landscape harm at year 1, but would be reduced at year 15. The harm would primarily be to 3 receptors and the Essex White, which currently is an open field, as we saw. Less than substantial harm to a number of heritage assets, as I showed you on the previous couple of slides, albeit at the lower end. Glinting greater impact on 3 receptors, which are those dwellings again I showed you, but the impacts would be significantly reduced over time with the mitigation planting, which would be secured. There would be some loss of best and most versatile agricultural land, but much less than has been reported. It said covered in the report, but the applicant did do soil sampling, which is much more scientific way than the DEFRA classification of land, which is obviously done at a much broader scale. So that is correct. That is only be 21% or something. I said that in the report that would be lost. It's the sort of 3A, if you will. Obviously, the benefit is, the securing of renewable energy. And one comment at public question time said that the development would serve, I think it was 8 houses who have an average of like 4 megawatts per year or something. I mean, as I saw the comment before, I did have a look at this, and actually Ofgem say that the average house per year is actually much lower than that, like significantly lower, about 2,900 kilowatts hours per year. So what this proposal would generate is, if you're talking kilowatt hours, it would be 35 million kilowatt hours. So 35 megawatts is obviously the shortened version of that figure. So there is a significant benefit to securing it. It would provide employment opportunities when it's during construction, and as I've said, biodiversity net gain there'd be much more significant than obviously the current arable use on the site, which has very little biodiversity value. Officers consider the harms of the development will not outweigh the benefits, taking into account the weight to be attached to each benefit and harm, and therefore the recommendation for you this evening is to approve. There was one other point that I would make. It's just about something was raised about the A120 safeguarded route. I think it's important to note that we did consult Highways England, who were obviously lead on that project, and they didn't have any objection to the application. So if we were, we can't, as a district council, it would be very difficult for us to refuse the application without the backing of Highways England, or National Highways as they're now called. So that was just a point on that. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you. Members. Councillor Mrs. Stark.
I don't know this area at all, so I actually yesterday went and walked the footpaths, went all the way around the site, and what I found was surprisingly quite an unspoilt and rather rural spot. I thought it was rather charming, actually. But anyway, that's just a personal view. So I think one of my concerns here is that we seem to be taking quite a lot of what the developer says at face value. This apparently is a solar farm, a 35 megawatt solar farm, which the developer says is capable of producing energy for 11,600 homes, which is more than twice the size of Great Dotley. I find that quite surprising, but I couldn't find anywhere in the documentation how that figure of 11,600 homes per year was calculated. I don't really understand what 35 megawatt solar farm means. Is that producing 35 megawatts in the summer, at any particular moment in time, or so on. So just generally, I would personally like to have a little bit more understanding in these applications as to how they come up with the amount of energy that is produced. But I can't challenge whether that's correct or not. I just don't know. There's not the information in the application. I do have a number of concerns with this application. I'll start off with landscape. I do accept that the advice that we've been given by our own independent experts that the effect on the landscape will be minor after 15 years. However, I also do accept their opinion that the effect on the public rights of way, which form part of the Essex Way, will be major / moderate. And having walked around the site and having looked carefully at the landscaping plan, it's quite clear that what you will be doing, and certainly quite a lot of that path, is walking between two fences, either side of which will be some solar panels. I actually couldn't really make head or tail of that landscaping plan, I'm afraid, and I think that's been picked up by the Ramblers as well. I don't think it's adequate. Part of the plan shows the hedge or the public right, well, the hedge, a hedge being planted right on top of the public right of way. There seems to be little detail about how much screen is going to be provided around the edge. When I walked around, the bit where I felt you could probably see the most impact of the proposed panels would be on the, I'm afraid I don't know the name of the road, but it's the road on the far western side of the site, where it does actually go down in a dip and up again. And so, and I certainly, even there is quite a lot of vegetation there, I could see right through the rather thin trees and so on. So I'm not happy with the landscape plan. I don't really understand exactly what it is showing, and it doesn't really indicate exactly what boundary planting is proposed. Those are my comments really on landscape. The other thing that is concerning me is, and it's really wasn't covered in the officer's report, I'm afraid, or the presentation, was the aspect of ecology. We have the person who farms the land, Mr. Speakman, has given us a statement which was circulated. He has on his land, he will know the land like the back of his hand. There are grey partridge there. There are turtle doves there, which are extremely rare, and there are yellow hammers. All those three birds are on the red list. We've mentioned in the report skylarks, but there's no mention at all of those other birds. He also said in his letter he runs a shoot there, and having walked around, there's an awful lot of maize planted and everything for the birds. And I think I did hear a grey partridge, by the way. He says in his statement that that the proposal is right in the middle of his shoot, and he will have to give up his shoot in order to make farm more economical. And I would like to see some assessment of the impact of the solar farm and the indirect impact of the loss of more intensive agriculture on the surrounding fields on those red list birds. The other aspect that I'm really concerned about is the soils. The most significant thing in this area regarding solar farms is whether or not the proposal is on best and most versatile land. And this is agricultural land is a national resource. There's only apparently 22% of it in this, 2% of land area in this country is suitable for growing crops, for cereals. And the agricultural land maps show that this is this part of Essex is a grade 2 agricultural land, which is in the best and most fertile category. The applicants have done their own site survey using a soil specialist who comes from Derby, and they have found that their analysis or their interpretation of the analysis is that the land is two categories lower than grade 2, and it largely falls within grade 3B. We're taking that at face value. I actually would like to actually get some independent evidence on whether that is correct, because that is the most significant thing about solar farms, is taking land away from agricultural production. We also have the evidence from Mr. Speakman again, who's farmed the land for many decades, that the land is a lot better than grade 3. So I would like to check whether that evidence is correct. The other point I would like to make is the point about the sequential test. So the applicant has stated that the maximum distance for an underground cable is 3.5 kilometres. We've just accepted that, and they have drawn a circle around the Cressing substation and looked at the sites within that site. It conveniently does not include the land near the Rivenhall airfield. I'm not sure why it is satisfactory to limit it to 3.5 kilometres. When the solar farm application came before us at Pentlow, the substation is substantially further away than 3.5 kilometres. So I'm not sure that that sequential test has been satisfied. There are also other issues which I won't go into, because I'll go on for ages, but there is this issue about glint and glare, high problems for 3 residents, loss of employment 1 person and his house, and the whole issue about access that's been raised. There is another issue which I think is important actually with the conditions. Condition 10, which deals with the decommissioning of the site. It simply states the applicant or the site must be restored after 40 years. It's quite common, I understand, in solar farm applications for that to be secured in some way by a bank guarantee. If the applicant goes bust, who's going to be removing all those panels? If Highways England suddenly decide that they do want to put a new A120 through there in 10 years' time, which we, of course, fingers crossed, hope that there will be A120, is that who's going to be paying for the panels to be removed? I don't think we want that kind of burden to be falling on the district council. It is quite common to have some kind of security on that. But all in all, I feel that this application is premature, and I think the fact that we don't even know how this connection is going to be made by the solar farm to the grid, I actually would like this application to be deferred, and I will move that this application is deferred.
Thank you, Councillor. Mrs. Parker. Does it find a seconder for deferral? Councillor Abbott and Councillor Beavers both put their hands up at the same time. Councillor Mrs. Beavers, you seconding. Right. Did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. And just very briefly, I think Councillor Ona Parker has given us a very good sort of overview of how she feels, and I feel my sort of thoughts chime with that. I went out and looked at the site also, and it's completely beautiful and a sort of church setting as well, and very rural. But what I will say is this: it was about probably about 8 years ago now. We had some solar farms that came in front of us as a district council, and at that time Brooks Newmark MP was our MP here, and he held a debate on the floor at the House of Commons, and I contributed to that debate, and I've still got the Hansard report, and I read it actually at the weekend again. And, in that report, it was about, protecting our landscapes and our agricultural land for what it is and to be used for in terms of agriculture, etc. There was a solar farm that did come forward at that time in Gosfield, and I remember there was a very big debate around that to do with the grading and the quality of the soil, and it was on a very old and redundant World War II airbase, And that site actually did go ahead in quite a small way. And I remember at that time landscaping was a huge issue. And I went back at the weekend and had a look at this and did a bit of a compare and contrast. And one really struggles to see that site from the road. It is set right back and very, very heavily screened. And I remember that the gradient of the land as well made the actual development more sort of lower set in the ground. And so for it couldn't really be seen, from residents and also from the industrial workspace there as well. And I just felt that there was a lot more that went into that. And as I say, indeed, it was taken to the House and discussed on the floor, and all of that was taken into consideration. So for all of those reasons and the points that Councillor Parker makes, I do believe that it should be deferred. And, we go back and relook at this. I also feel, Madam Chairman, that in size and scale, it's huge. And I find that quite hard to understand in terms of that. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, I just want to draw attention to the map on page 106. I'm presuming that's a map of a previous iteration of the scheme, because it's different to the one we were shown. I think that's got the parcels further to the east, which were taken off.
Probably.
Yeah. Thank you for that confirmation. So, I know this area extremely well. I represented Bradwell at district level for nearly 20 years, about 15 years, and then there was a boundary change, and then also as county councillor. And I know many of the residents who live down there, so I can understand their caution. By default, I'd want more renewable energy, but I do agree, and I've always advocated, including in my role as an Essex Climate Action Commissioner, that we need to be focusing as much as possible on putting them on buildings. But the government, in its infinite lack of wisdom, has basically removed our ability to require that, which is quite incredible. That said, solar on farmland is something that's going to happen, and so long as it's well done and in the right location, it can be acceptable. But like other speakers, I'm a bit unconvinced. I'm sort of very difficult to know which way to go on this one because of the lack of detail and the uncertainties around it. The valley that runs through there, through Perry Green, is extremely attractive. It's a beautiful piece of countryside with sort of an undulation, which almost counts as a hill here in Essex, I suppose. But I was a little bit intrigued, I have to say, by Councillor Parker's comment about the landscape and the wildlife. And what does she think the A120 is going to do if that goes through there? It's not going to help the landscape and the wildlife, but I'll leave that one for now. So that was one of my main concerns. The officer said this is relatively low ecological value, I think he said. But those of us who live locally know it's not. And there was an ecological report. I know we can't talk about all of it because part of it was confidential. I don't know if other members had a chance to read it, but I did. And there's clearly a lot of important wildlife in this area. Those of us who know the local lanes late in the evening often see brown hares there. And indeed, the very nearby Rivenhall Airfield ecological studies showed 70 species of birds, including many red-listed. So that's my sort of number one concern, is I'm not clear on how we can have a presentation that says there's low ecological impacts, but we've got a professional report that says it's very rich in ecology, and I'm not certain about what the impacts of this scheme would be. The second concern I have are these containers, as they're described, shipping containers, I believe. And I saw on the drawings they have bulkhead lights on them. Well, having shipping containers in the countryside with bulkhead lights on would be a very industrial feature. And normally these schemes, I don't believe, are designed in that way. They'd have sort of cabins which are more carefully designed. So if you combine that with possible high-intensity lighting, very poorly directed, and security fencing, I think you are going to have a more industrial feel to it. So that was another uncertainty I had. There doesn't seem to be anything in the conditions specific to the shipping containers. The third concern I had about is the access along Links Road. That is one-way working only. 2 cars for much of its length can't pass. So I'd be concerned about how the construction traffic is going to be managed. it is really a very small country lane. I did have a thought on the cable, whether if any of the landowners did agree, you could potentially, unless I'm told otherwise, I might be wrong, and this mole is underneath the roads. But if as the speakers have said, that's not possible and you had to go along the highway, yeah, I mean, they'd have to do it in stages. And obviously the biggest concern is any trenching of the road near Galleys Corner, which is going to cause very significant traffic congestion. But that would be an issue, presumably, between the developers and the highway authorities, because I think it might potentially impinge on national highways as well as Essex County Council. So for me, as I say, my default would probably be to support a scheme like this, but I've got problems around those three or four elements of design: these industrial-looking shipping containers, and the lighting, how the construction traffic would work along Links Road. But my primary concern is the big gap between what we're being told on ecology and what we know, actually, from a professional ecology report, that it's a very rich area for wildlife. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you,
Councillor Abbott. It actually says in the report on page 115, the inverters will be within shipping containers approximately 12 metres long, 2.5 wide and 3 metres high, and there'll be 7 in number.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So I'm concerned about the impact they'd have.
Yes. Did you want to come back?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think between myself and Matt, if we could come back and clarify just some of those points that have been raised. So just on the broader point in terms of the level of detail, picking up on Councillor Parker's main point, I'll ask Matt to elaborate on this a little bit more. But in terms of the connection point, what the applicant has effectively been able to do is demonstrate how a connection could be achieved to the grid. Through the red line that's been submitted with the application, there's been talk about the additional land that could potentially be used as another route, effectively, to achieving that connection. But in terms of what members need to consider this evening, it is around the solar farm itself rather than effectively the utility connection, which is a point really between the developer and the statutory undertaker. It isn't a form of development that requires planning permission. So in that respect, it is absolutely why, acknowledging the concerns that have been raised, that is a wider point for the statutory undertaker and the applicant as developer of the site to follow up on. So the key consideration that members need to think about this evening is what's being proposed on the site itself in terms of the solar farm. Just coming back on Councillor Abbott's point and this point about shipping containers, obviously the comments within the report noted. Condition 3 within the recommendation on page 133 of the agenda makes it clear that no development shall commence until full details have been submitted for various aspects, and that includes the various buildings and structures on the site, as well as the details of the solar panels. Because obviously, as Matt has explained, this is using the Rochford principle in terms of agreeing parameters for the form of development. So although it's under the guise of a full application, in effect, if you think of it, it's not dissimilar to an outline approach with those further details coming forward. And what we've stated within the report is, given that that detail is currently absent, you're considering a worst case scenario, and then should the application be approved, we would then bring back that detail to planning committee to actually, under a discharge condition application, which would be unusual, but given the approach that's sought with the application, that's what we would seek to do.
Can I stop you for 1 minute, Chris? I've just watched the notice by the time. Can I ask someone to move standing orders? Does it get seconded? Are all in favour that we continue the meeting? Thank you very much. So sorry. Oh. Time has flown. I didn't realise what the time was.
So yeah, in terms of the point about detail, we do have the control. We would have the control through condition 3, as recommended within the agenda, to control the nature and form of the building. So if there's a specific concern around the detailed design, ultimately as planning authority, we would have control over those buildings, and similarly in terms of lighting as well, obviously, across the site. So hopefully that's clear in terms of those 2 points. In relation to access, absolutely acknowledge the point, but I'd just draw members' attention, obviously, to the response from Highways on that matter, which raises no objection. and that is a matter that's been discussed at length between officers and the Highway Authority in terms of the access, and obviously the scale of the proposal and what's proposed is clear. But before I hand over to Matt just to elaborate a little bit more on the connection and also on the landscape point and the ecology, just picking up Councillor Parker on the soils issue that you raise in terms of the quality of the agricultural land. So as a matter of course, we don't for any application undertake a specialist independent assessment of the quality of the agricultural land, and that would be quite an undertaking to do on every single major greenfield application that we assess. There is, obviously, we benefit in the district in one sense that actually the quality of agricultural land within the district is generally high, and because of the supply of that is why we tend to state within reports that the harm attributed to the loss of that particular site is limited on the basis of the overall supply. Noting obviously the concern given the size of the site and the proposal, that in this case obviously it isn't a permanent form of development, although it's obviously over a long period of time. But I would just, I think we would struggle to come to a different conclusion that even if the grading was increased in terms of the agricultural land, we've still got the overall point that actually, when you look at it in a wider context, the supply of quality agricultural land that we've got is quite considerable still within the district. At that point, I'll just, if I can, ask Matt just to come back specifically on the connection, the landscape and the ecology point that was raised by Councillor Abbott, if that's okay, Matt.
Thanks, Chris. Just before I do that, just on lighting, there is no proposed lighting as part of the development, just to confirm that. We have put a condition on in case any lighting does come forward, but I understand that there will be no lighting on the site, so just to clarify that. In terms of ecology, I wasn't saying the site had no value, and I was actually more generalising with arable fields. Generally speaking, the actual field itself, not the sort of hedges and trees that are next to it, but the actual field itself that is ploughed has quite a low biodiversity value. And what the development would do in this case is create more habitat by virtue of increasing the number of hedges and filling in gaps in hedges and creating wildflower meadows. So actually, what I was saying, trying to allude to, is actually the biodiversity gain, which would be secured, would actually be more than what is currently there. And the skylight mitigation, as has been mentioned, is one part of that, and that would be on a different site. So just to clarify that. In terms of the landscape plan, it is, as Chris said, it's just high-level principles. We don't have the details. It's just securing those principles of a 3-metre high hedge to secure the screen the site and strengthening hedgerows and the wildflower meadows. That's all it does. Obviously, the actual finer details we would secure through condition, as we would normally. So I appreciate obviously the confusion. It's something obviously that you normally would potentially have details for if it wasn't the Rochdale envelope approach, as we discussed. In terms of the connection point, I don't think I've got too much to add to what Chris said. They've demonstrated that they can. The red line goes up to the connection point in the highway boundary, and that's how it could come forward. If it was to come forward in another way, then that would require a separate application to be considered. But as officers, we're satisfied that they have shown a potential connection to the Galleys Corner substation, which would be deliverable subject to agreement with Essex Highways and potentially national highways, as has been mentioned. So just to clarify on that point, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Mann.
Madam Chairman, I'm slightly more relaxed about this than some colleagues, I believe. I mean, it is anecdotal, but I do have some fields given over to this use on the fringe of my ward, sort of parallel to a public right of way, and I've had the benefit of observing sort of the evolution over a period of of years. I did have considerable misapprehension at the beginning, but the harms do diminish year by year as the planting sort of progresses. And I think the biodiversity point is an important one. We all know the monoculture and ploughed fields, back-to-back ploughed fields that we have got here are not particularly strong in biodiversity value, and that it, perversely, it is quite possible for a development like this to increase that value, and certainly in the sites that I sort of regularly walk by, there remains an abundance of, hares, deer, and many types of birds, and I'm pleased that is evidence that the destruction that I feared was not there. Another possible reason for being more relaxed is the lack of objections. There were very few, and I read them. I mean, they were strong and passionate objections. Don't get me wrong, but they were not as many as I might have expected. I mean, Peregrine is not the most populated place in the world, and yeah, it is a very beautiful place to live, but there is not the outcry that I might have expected from there, and I think there are some things that we have to take as a given. The fact there is no objection from highways, I think, is also an important point. And I think I read somewhere that the applicant claims that 83% of the land is in fact 3B. Now that's a very high proportion, and we do get upset when particularly grade 1 and 2, very good agricultural land, is threatened. That would not necessarily appear to be the case here, and we do have to, I think, trust the applicant's consultants on that, unless we find some way of actually challenging it. So I am not as pessimistic as previous speakers, and as Councillor Abbott said, solar on farmland is going to happen.
I'm rather concerned about paragraph 131 of the MPPF. I think this beautiful area, and it's not right. I think MP would give us the protection to refuse this, in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm mindful of the time, and I will be brief. I've condensed my notes, but having got more time, I was going to increase them, but I won't. We must take note of the large amount of information being provided worldwide relative to our future needs for electricity. Solar power is a great example of one route forward. This is a fact of life. However, there must be compromises in all walks of life, and choices have to be made. Should we not have sufficient electricity in the near future, what will our children do? And what of their families, and so on? We are ridding ourselves of coal, oil-powered generators, etc. Many do not want nuclear power. Wind generation is not very reliable. Gas power is very much political at the moment. I think this is a good scheme, and I certainly vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. I too will try and be brief. I, like Councillor Mann, am inclined to be more positive about this. We do need alternative sources of power. Solar panels are one way of achieving that, and they do have to go somewhere. I think, as Councillor Abbott said, farmland is the most likely of sites for this, this type of development. Yes, they do have to be in the right place. I did read the ecological report that was sent to us. I have read it all, and obviously there is a lot of wildlife on this site, and it is very attractive. I know it, and it is a very attractive landscape. But there is considerable mitigation in place here in terms of the buffers being provided. No trees and hedgerows are going to be lost, which is an entirely good thing and a bit of a blessing. And in fact, in places, the hedgerows are going to be enhanced. There are good distances between the site and the heritage assets. And actually, as Councillor Mann said, given the scale of this and where it is, there are a small number of very heartfelt objections, but a relatively small number. And I personally, I find myself supporting this, given the information that we have been provided with, both by officers, and I thank Matt for his very good report, and by the applicants' experts. And yes, all right, you can sometimes take experts' reports with a pinch of salt, and I think we should. We shouldn't necessarily swallow everything hook, line and sinker, but actually there are attached to this reports from people who clearly know their business and know what they're doing. So I did have one question around how we calculated the land value, but actually Chris answered that. So I think I'm finished with what I wanted to say, but I am largely in support of this. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Well, it is getting rather late. I do have a motion on the table, so I'm going to put that to the vote first. I have a motion to defer. All those for further information. All those in favour of deferring the application? Those against deferral? That has fallen. Thank you. Now I need a full motion on it, please. Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Well, I will move officer's recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder? It does, Councillor Johnson. Thank you. So. Yes.
Apologies, Madam Chairman. Sorry. I've just been pondering Condition 6 and the comment that I made in relation to Condition 3, and picking up on Councillor Parker's point earlier about the landscape master plan and the points. So I made a reference to the fact that the details pursuant to Condition 3 could come back to committee, even though it's a discharge condition application. Technically, we could potentially do the same on the Condition 6 in terms of the landscaping details to make sure members were absolutely happy on those points, and the specific concerns around the extent of the buffers and so forth. I think the only thing I would suggest is we might just need to double check the parameter plans to make sure we don't end up in any difficulty on that, but that we've got some leeway around it. But if members felt strongly on that landscape point, that is something else we could ensure would happen should members decide to support the application.
I feel strongly about containers, especially as they say there's going to be one in each patch. Councillor Abbott.
Exactly, Madam Chairman. Is there anything we could do in terms of an informative to say when they come back on details we will not accept shipping containers in the countryside? But I think that would provide insurance. I am further assured by what the officer said about it coming back. But one final point. We're not allowed to talk about some of the ecology report because it told us not to. But there are a series of recommendations in there which are not, I feel, fully captured in the conditions here. So it's getting late, stumbling on my words. How do we stand with that? Should we not be putting the recommendations from the ecology report into our conditions?
I'll come back on that, Councillor. Thank you. In terms of conditions, we have put on what has been requested by the council's ecologist. So there's, I forget exactly what they all are off the top of my head, but
I just say one relates to a protected species, so I feel we can't ignore that. We have to, by law, do what the ecology report says because it's a protected species.
Mm.
Councillor Abbott, without having the debate, we might need to refer back to the ecology report if you can bear with us. But I mean, all I can do is reiterate the point that Matt's made in terms of the specialist ecologist has inferred that.
Councillor Mr. Spark.
May I just come back on condition 10 because I raised that when I spoke earlier, but I didn't get an answer to that, which is how do you secure or guarantee the removal of the panels? I mean, this is not something that I've just plucked out of the air. It is, and certainly when I went to the Longfield Solar Farm consultation, this is something that is secured in national infrastructure projects, a requirement that the developer provide some kind of security to guarantee that in the event of them becoming insolvent, somebody will pick up the tab for removing the panels.
So absolutely acknowledge the point, and I suppose the difference between this application that's before you this evening and the Longfield Solar Farm proposal is it is an NSIP proposal. It is a nationally significant infrastructure project. This is coming through through the normal planning system. I take the point because it's a large area of land. In terms of securing it, it's not proposed. It's not something which has been proposed by the applicant. It's not something where we have a policy basis at the moment to require the provision of it for something of this scale, I would suggest. And the condition 10 does give the ability to remove the panels. I take the point about the cost, but it isn't something which is proposed effectively within the application.
It is something we really should consider because National Grid is considering in my area taking down some of the cables off some small, absolute pylons. So we've asked would the pylons be removed. They said no, we don't have to remove them, we'll leave them. Can't afford to take them down. So it is something we really, really should be thinking about when we do these kind of things, I really feel.
Just come back on the ecology point. So the conditions of 13 is about that's recommended. 13 is about the construction environmental management plan. So that's protecting any wildlife, including protected species during construction. So details of that. And then the 14 is about the licence by Natural England or the district level licence. So obviously that will cover any protected species and the protection of those protected species. And then condition 16 is the ecological design strategy. So in my opinion, well, I'm not an ecologist, but I would say that that protection of those species that you're referring to would be wrapped up within those three conditions. That would be my view.
Well, members, I think we have given this a fair airing. I really do, and I do think Chris and Matthew are quite aware of all the things that are concerning us and that we want brought back to us at some stage. So I'm going to put that to the vote. It's been moved by Councillor Mrs Spray and seconded by Councillor Johnson. All those in favour? Those against? Abstentions. So that has been approved. Thank you very much.
Madam Chairman, just to confirm, that does include the informative on the containers.
Well, members, thank you very much indeed. That brings us to the end of our year, and I wish you all a very happy, healthy Christmas, and especially a healthy 2022. I'd like to thank the officers for their attendance, and I'd especially like to thank Alison for all the reading she's done for us tonight. And I really would like to know what went wrong with the system, because, I mean, we've not had this problem all the time we were doing this virtually. When I sat here on my own, managed to get through to all you members, everything went right. And it seemed to be a completely different system. I mean, I had a computer here and a computer there, and Emma had headphones and all sorts of things, and I couldn't hear what people were saying to her. So I don't know if it was the microphone system or what it was, but something wasn't right. And if we're going to have these kind of meetings, we do. I even saw the bandwidth is low. I get that every 2 minutes on mine. I thought, I'm at home. But anyway.
It's been very poor all day in this bit of Braintree.
Oh, well, I say anyhow.
Signal.
Thank you very much, everyone, and good night. And see you next year.